Very well.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I noticed. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. A short meeting. See from the agenda. I should tell all people sitting over there, all those officers and cabinet members and so on. There's no voting tonight, so you won't be able to outvote us. It's a proper scrutiny meeting. We'll just be asking questions. We get through the meeting with some good outcomes at the end of it. First item then is apologies for absence. If Will don't mind to
Chair, we've got apologies from councillors Warfield, Yates, Lung, Ho and Robertson.
definitely Robertson, or is he on his way?
Apologies as far as I'm aware.
Okay, righto. Thank you. Declarations of interest from anybody on these matters? Well, invested in planning, I know, but I think of the nature that we declare, right? Thank you. And we've got the minutes of the previous meeting. There's a slight amendment to the ones that have gone out. And Jamie checked and confesses he wasn't here. He had another important matter to attend, although I was convinced he was here. Sure, he'll make his contributions up twice as much this time. But he wasn't here, and so I've just amended the minutes. Fact. Ollie,
On item 13, a request was made for a link on the new website that would allow members of the public to submit proposed topics to members for scrutiny. And I just wonder whether that has happened yet on our.
unfortunately, we don't have matters arising, Colin, so we should ask that before the meeting. But I'm no doubt somebody's heard that legal question, so okay. Read the minutes. I don't want to know. Okay, go on. Right, health matters. The first item on the the next item on the agenda, really. I did give a report to members. I attended that meeting, and I'll be attending the next one apparently because Councillor Young doesn't want me to babysit, so I have to go to the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Healthcare Overview and Scrutiny Committee at the County Council, and I reported on the West Midlands Ambulance Service and the performance updates that were shared with us. I mean, perhaps I couldn't fully understand, but I've asked them to do perhaps some narrative with their reports in future. Defibrillators, which I did circulate to members, and by the way, Councillor David Salter did reply in detail with some, I thought, some good ideas. I'm following up on that. And then, of course, there's the Director of Public Health annual report. Now, some of the older reports are still available on the internet, and if you look at some of those, there's no. What was in this report is about the ageing population. There's nothing new in there. It's just that we're getting closer and closer to that date when there'll be so many of us, it's going to overwhelm the system unless some action is taken with regard to the workforce and the abilities for local authorities to deal with us older people. So it's a worthwhile report to read, even though I said there's nothing particularly new in there, but it's a bit more stark to read it as the years get closer from the report there. I recommend that. And I'll certainly be asking the Health Scrutiny Task Group to look at that in the future as well. We get that set up. The other item was from with the Health Watch Staffordshire year 2 programme update, and there's an awful lot in there. Again, it's useful for all of us, but the Health Task Group as well to look at. There's a lot of information in there, research and evidence of consultations, which hopefully people will find valuable. So that's my report on that. And of course, you've got the work programme of the Health Scrutiny Task Group here. That's Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A couple of things I'd like to raise. I've raised with you certainly my concern about what appears to be a reconfiguration of the primary care networks locally, but that's something that we can look at hopefully internally rather than raise at the county Health Scrutiny Committee. A couple of things, if I might, please. The next meeting on the 28th of October, it's got a report from the Women's Health Working Group. Can I flag up to our Vice Chair or to you, if you're there as a substitute, the issue around access to menopause services? I was listening to an article on the radio a couple of days ago, and access to menopause, pre-menopause services is very limited generally across the country, but I'm aware from casework and so on that it's very limited. certainly in Burnwood and probably across the district. So could that be flagged up as an issue of importance to our residents? The other thing I'd like to flag up is that the County Council is currently consulting on yet another community strategy. And it seems to be a missed opportunity. The community strategy is talking about, the local communities providing early services for people who need support for loneliness, mental health problems, and so on. But there's no reference that I can see to it here. Councillor Cox, as the chair of Health Scrutiny, might be able to tell me otherwise. But rather than working in silos where somebody's looking at community strategy and someone's looking at health issues, why not combine the two and get the Health Scrutiny Committee to look in detail at what the community strategy is proposing? It just seems to be a missed opportunity, because we know all those public health issues really do affect people's health and well-being.
We'll actually email the chair of that committee, so we can discuss that further at some point.
Okay, thanks.
If it's sponsors, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Let's move on to the next agenda item. That's the medium-term financial strategy drive put at the front of the agenda for that important officer. Anthony, do you want to lead as well?
Welcome as well, Chair.
Right, yeah. I know there's a lot of unknowns still. We've the budget, autumn statement at the end of October. It's a new government and that, and there's still a lot of question marks about the future and that. But I think you've done your best there to actually give us some idea of what's to come. Item paragraph 1.7 remains an inherently high level of uncertainties around the local finance regime, and they've been heightened with the general election, and therefore the likelihood of government policy changes is significant. You want to lead that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've probably just done the paper. There's lots of uncertainty. It's a challenging time. I think for local government nationally, it becomes even more challenging when not only have we been relying on one-year settlements for a number of years, but we continue to not know the direction of travel of the current government. We hope in due course we'll have multi-year settlements, but not at that point yet. So until we start getting some actual meat on the bones of budget announcements, there is just some natural uncertainty that we need to be able to accommodate. I think in terms of this paper, I suppose key things for me are well, the recommendations obviously around windfall income from the local government finance settlement to fund business as usual and the capital investment in 28-29. Also to get your views on the potential level of district council tax increase for 25-26, but then also around the communication strategy for the budget consultation as well. I think we always struggle to do the budget consultation in a way that frankly is really meaningful for residents, and that's not a criticism of us as an organisation. It is just inherently difficult to engage residents in what is a fairly dry consultation. So there's an appendix F. You'll see the common strategy for that budget consultation. Councillor Strachan can't make it this evening, which is why I'm here. But Anthony, is there anything that you want to add on and flavour to add on to that?
I suppose the only thing I would add to that is I think last year we provided some benchmarking information for councillors on council tax and business rates, which we've included again. This year we've also included some benchmarking information on unit costs. So how do we compare to nearest neighbours? I think that's quite useful. You will see some, in the majority of the headlines, we're in the lower areas of unit costs. There are some individual services that are ragged. Point I would make on that is entirely appropriate. As a policy choice, the council can choose to spend more on a particular area than a nearest neighbour or another district council. All I would say is that as long as you're aware of that and you're comfortable with the reasons behind that, that's entirely appropriate. We have included some information on different council tax increase levels and what the impact on income would be. As Councillor Strachan would always say, we are in listening mode when we come to this committee. We come here 3 times. This is the first time of the 3.
quite I'm saying quite ambitious, but you put a target out there, which not clever to do if you're involved in politics, but target is to hope to get 2,000 responses to the budget consultation. So, wish you luck with that.
Meaning,
You're actually a bit ambitious there. Yeah. Another thing, the observation to make is about the council tax. I think I'm right in saying council tax is increased by the maximum allowed, as long as I can remember on this council.
I don't think you are correct in saying that.
Which year was wrong?
Sorry?
The one before election.
Yeah, and well, last year we went up by I think 2.7, where 2.9 is the maximum allowed. Prior to that, it was frozen. So yeah, you'll see on the benchmarking there that compared to both our nearest neighbours and England local authorities as a whole, annual increases both recently and over the past 5 years has been less, substantially less than other local authorities. Whilst the tax base, i.e. the number of properties paying, has risen slightly more than others, our actual rate of council tax rate is less by a clear margin.
And the council tax collection rate there, which is 3.21 there, I mean, it is still very high. There was that news article somewhere locally saying it was poor, but I didn't understand it at the time, but I do know that it's always been very good here. The fourth bullet point on that page, Lichfield District Council's collection rate is 98.4%, which is higher than the nearest neighbour average of 97.7 and higher than the English average of 96.2. So I don't know whether that, didn't imagine it, I did read it somewhere, but I didn't quite understand it at the time. And these figures show that it's not the case. Any questions for the leader or for Sue, please?
Okay. Thanks, Chair. We're being asked to provide feedback on the use of windfall income for business as usual, and further down paragraph 3.43, where we're actually given some detail about that, which I'll find shortly. Yeah, paragraph 3.43, business as usual capital investment requirements such as ICT vehicles, etc. That doesn't seem to meet to fit quite, because this is an additional income that was unexpected, and yet those are issues that have already been funded, as I understand it, in the capital strategy. So is this increased costs, or how has that come about? I mean, it seems to me that windfall opportunity could have been used elsewhere, but I'd be grateful for an explanation. I've got another couple of questions. Yes. Shall I do them all together?
Go on then, yes.
Okay. Homelessness pressures, page 22. It'd be really useful, certainly in discussions that happen regionally and nationally, that a number of us will be taking part in. It'd be really useful to have some figures around that. What was budgeted to deliver homeless services and what's been incurred. I know it's an issue that's affecting every council with housing responsibilities around the country, but that would be really useful if that could be provided. And then a couple, if I may, on.
That's before you go, page 22, what paragraph were you referring to?
3.33 is that?
22. It's 3.33.
Okay.
And then a couple of more parochial ones, if I might share. In the minutes that we've just agreed, there was reference to the fact that the alterations to Burnwood Leisure Centre and the need for refurbishment hadn't yet been, funding hadn't yet been found. And I just wonder if there's been any change there. I mean, this page 35 in my notes I've got on this. Whether that's possible to this stage say whether that funding has been found. Yes, it's Appendix D. Country Leisure Centre. There's that sort of gap there, I think. But also, I'm concerned about the Burnwood Community Hub that was announced, 250,000 of UK SPF money for Burnford for the community hub. That's on Appendix E, page 38. Would it be possible for the leads to give an update of where we are on that, please? Thanks.
Thank you. Any order you wish to respond to?
Thank you. I'll try and do them in the order they were asked, I think. And Anthony may very well give more specifics around the windfall and our use of that for BAU, rather than relying on internal or external borrowing for that. I would say Anthony's approach, which is a very prudent approach to budgeting, means that frequently there are elements of windfall budget which perhaps we had an inkling that they might appear, but certainly wouldn't budget. So certainly our approach to things like new homes bonus over the years has always been to exclude it and not build it into our base budget, which does mean that we then have large chunks of money, but we're always in the position where actually we can use that to for our benefit, rather than relying on putting that in our base budget, which then may not appear. So I think, as I say, Anthony might give a bit more detail around that, but I think our general approach to that is to always exclude anything that we think might be coming, and then to use that for BAU activities, rather than kind of build it into the base budget to begin with. In terms of numbers for the homelessness pressures, I believe, and we'll get the numbers to you, but I think they've trebled over the last year or so. So I think they've gone for around, so things like temporary accommodation has gone from around 80,000 already up to around 250,000, 240,000. That is a significant uptick in terms of for Lichfield district.
We could have that detail. I think that'd be really.
So yeah, I think the
exemplifies the pressures that districts and other
absolutely, and I suppose slightly worryingly, we are one of the least affected councils sort of nationally, really, particularly when you speak to councils who are anywhere near any of the sort of London or anything like that. They are facing significant pressure. So whilst it is a huge increase for us, we're still fairly well protected from that. Burnwood Leisure Centre, don't know the answer to that, so if Anthony knows, I'll let him answer. If not, then I'll update you afterwards if that's okay. And the Burnwood Hub, we have been trying very hard since we assigned that money from the UK SPF to actually spend that money, looking at least 2 different locations for that, neither of which, for multiple reasons, have been successful in terms of coming forward. But I know officers have been spending a huge amount of time trying to secure a place that we can invest that money into Burnwood for that community hub. Haven't been successful in terms of acquiring an existing venue, so we are now looking at an alternative site, but we are absolutely committed to spending that money in Burnwood for the community hub, just perhaps in a slightly different way than we initially envisaged, but it will still give that same outcome.
Are you able to give us details of the 2 venues?
Well, if you do, then I'll declare an interest, and
Okay.
as a member of the organisation that actually owns the building.
That's the question. Are you able to give us any details, or do you want to email us all later?
Can I? I'm going to look at my chief executive. I'm not entirely sure how much of this is confidential and how much isn't. I'm just conscious that we're in open session. So, can we give a high level overview, or would you rather just do it on an email to members just to be safe?
To put you in a difficult position.
No, absolutely, yeah. And I don't want to avoid a question if I can answer it.
I think an email to members would be more. I'd be more comfortable with at this point, please.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. So the review of that, I'm going to hand over to Anthony.
Yes, yeah.
So, leaders correct on the BAU, business as usual capital investment. We do budget for that in the modelling, but because at the time we produced the model last year, we didn't have enough capital resource to fund that. So, the assumption was we would be borrowing to fund that. The proposal I've put in front of you is what we did last year. So we are using any windfall income to fund the shortfall and therefore have no extra borrowing, basically because it makes the revenue budget more sustainable because you haven't got to have borrowing costs to repay. So that's the proposal in front of you, which is consistent with the previous financial year that we did this. On the homelessness pressures, so we have to do a housing benefit subsidy claim We do an interim one at the half year. We just done the half year one, and the budget pressure is around 415,000. We've got 159,000 built in the budget, so the shortfall is 256,000. At the moment, we are looking as to whether we can identify savings, windfalls, earmark reserves that can be redirected to remove that pressure in this year. However, the likelihood is, for at least for a short period of time, that's going to become a ongoing pressure. So it will be something that when we bring forward the next iteration of the medium-term financial strategy is likely to appear an ongoing pressure in homelessness. And we have, I mean, we did recently a response to the Treasury's spending review, and we reiterated that fact that that was a pressure it's facing not only districts but unitary councils, and therefore something needed to be done, because I think there are some councils where this will bankrupt the council if it carries on. We did send a copy of that response to both the local MPs to get it raised on their radar as well. So I think it's well known. It's just what the government do about it in this year's settlement and as part of the comprehensive spending review. And then on the last one, could you just refresh our memory? I know it was the Burntwood Leisure Centre.
Yeah, Burntwood Leisure Centre, there's a need for some investment for refurbishments that have been on the anvil for quite some time now, and I just wondered where we are with actually finding those. Reference is on page 35, I believe. Bear with me. Yeah, it's Appendix D.
That's the one that's the net cost of service you're looking at there.
That's revenue rather than capital, I presume.
Yeah.
Right, but is there money now within the capital budget? I mean, we've just seen that, you know, there's a environment, if you like, of a windfall to business as usual. Is there any scope in that to actually get these refurbishments done, which have been waiting for such a long time?
So I think you're right. There's been a £50,000 budget built in recently for the change in refurbishment. We can, as part of this, you could emphasise that that's a priority as a committee, and we could then take that away and look at that, how we fund that. That's the whole reason we come to the committee, to try and get your views on what you believe are priorities for the council.
Can I suggest that's one of the part of our response?
Yes. To the agree.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah. Happy with that. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? I mean, the other. Oh, sorry, Colin, please. Sorry.
Yeah, page 21 and 22, the tables 2.31 and 2.34. I've already had a phone conversation with Anthony about this on Monday, but I thought it was important, as I didn't understand it initially and was concerned about it. It's given me some reassurance that we get a public reassurance on this as well. If you look particularly at table 3.34, the approved budget general reserves are dropping over the term of the medium-term financial strategy by 28-29, which seems like a long way away, but it will be upon us before we know it. They drop below the £2 million figure that we've agreed as a council should be our safety net for future. So I'd like to know why that has happened and what we're going to do to try and stop us falling into that perilous state. Please.
And Anthony's already given you an answer to it, so I'm just going to have to make sure that my answer now aligns with Anthony's answer that he's already given you, don't I? So I think the approach that we've taken with budgeting, certainly the last couple of years, has been different to the way that we've gone about it in the past. I think in the past we've been very much focused on building up quite a very, very, very healthy set of reserves. What that has meant is that we weren't perhaps doing the things in our community that our residents would expect us to be doing. So certainly things like the Birmingham Road site that we're investing in will generate a level of revenue for this organisation which currently isn't budgeted before, I've been very clear that we need to be investing back in our communities, and there will be ongoing revenue streams going forward, which will help us avoid that position that you described there. I would say, as I said earlier on the earlier question, Anthony, quite rightly, models the pessimistic scenario very well, which isn't necessarily going to be the situation that we actually find ourselves in.
The answer which Anthony gave me on Monday, which differs slightly from yours, was that there's no provision here for any proceeds we might get from land that we're selling in the foreseeable future.
Well, that was the revenue streams I just talked about, yeah, as well as the capital receipt.
Okay.
I'll just add as well, just so proud to say what I also said was our modelling is based on the previous government.
Big little bit. Sorry, Anthony.
Sorry. So our modelling is based on the previous government's approach to local government finance reform. There's a fair chance, if not next year, but the future, that is likely to be. So, whilst we've done projections, these were done a year ago with a different government approach. And it also assumes no mitigating actions are taken by the council. So, you know, if this did turn out to be reality, have to start looking at options to increase income, reduce expenditure, etc., etc. So, yes, it paints a picture, but it's out of date by a long way because of changes in the government finance arena.
So I'm not able to make the comment I didn't feel able to make to Anthony on Monday, and possibly shouldn't make in this forum because we're supposed to not be party political. So we're relying on this new government to bail us out of the hole that the last government put us into. I think that was.
No, he doesn't need to
I
respond.
think that'd be a gross misrepresentation of the we find ourselves in, Chair.
We said that about my council tax observation. Councillor Miles Trent, I've got the list already. So Miles, please, then Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one question and then one observation. So the question relates to 3.33 in the agenda report, where it talks about the pay award. And you might say it's just too soon to say very much about it, but the assumption is an award of 4%. But then we're informed about the demands from the National Joint Council unions, which are substantially higher. So I just wondered if you had any observations about how safe an assumption that 4% is. That's the question. Shall I do the observation as well?
Yeah, please.
That was about a later section on the appendix about engagement and getting people's feedback. It was just to say I think some ideas are really good, and the YouTube videos by councillors, I fully support that, and particularly if it can be from various political parties, that I fully support that.
Agreed. Thanks. Anthony's way closer to the certainty around that than I am. I'll avoid the opportunity to make a nakedly political point and hand over to Anthony on that.
So I think at this stage the 4% is quite a realistic one, and the reason I say that is for two reasons. One, chief officers part of this, not the chief exec, but the chief officers, has been settled at 2.5%. I believe that certainly one of the unions is out to ballot at the moment. If the pay award that the employers have offered is accepted, I believe 4% will still be a realistic assessment. It may even, the actual may even come in lower than the 4%. So I think the only way it potentially could be a realistic assumption is if there is a vote against it and there is some form of strike action, which then means that the employees have to go back again. I'm not sure that would be the case at this point in time, but you know, we'll see. We've got further iterations to come forward. If we have to change the model, we can change the model.
Keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
It'd be appropriate for this committee to thank the chief officers for their Councillor Ray, Paul Ray.
Yeah, just on the question about council tax and where that should be set. So you know, it's too soon to say. I just guess envisaging we're probably not going to go low in the spectrum, but let's see. But I guess there are strains out there. People are struggling, and therefore I think what we therefore that leads to the budget is to increase the amount of council tax support. So we need to look hard at that to make sure that is funded more than it probably is this year. We've all got residents that are struggling and relying upon that. And then that led me to think with that windfall, whether we use some of that to support that sort of that fund. And then the second point is with business rates. And again, I suppose really, Anthony, is there anything we as a council can do to support in particular our retail operators here in our town centres and the city centre here by some relief on business rates targeted at high streets? I appreciate it's all set nationally and there's a lot of complexity around that, but is there anything that we could do? Because I think that would be a strong message and also commercially help our local economy if we could do something to support on business rates.
I'll do the high level bit and then Anthony can do the actual proper detail. The council tax support, I would say, actually it's been a key focus in the last sort of 18 months, 24 months of getting out as much council tax support as we possibly can. And I think actually we've got a fairly generous council tax support scheme as an organisation, which I know Lizzie and her team have worked really hard on to make sure we are getting that support to the people who most need it. But there's always more things we can do and tweaks and refinements and making sure it's really getting to the people who need it. And that feels like it's under almost constant review by the team. I know the cost of living drop-in sessions that we're doing are actually really good in terms of not just thinking about your council tax bill, but the whole range of services that the council can support you with. So I think that's a positive news story, but agree, there's certainly always more things we can do. In terms of the business rate, the NNDR, yes, there is more we can do now. There are specific schemes that we've got. Of course, there's the things like the hospitality rate relief, which is due to come to an end at some point soon. We are actually already doing some work at the moment thinking about how we ensure that all those businesses who are entitled to rate relief are actually claiming it. There are some who we think about claiming it. In terms of an actual sort of either district-wide scheme or focused on particular sectors, I think we need to just think really carefully about that. Obviously, the lion's share of that goes to partners as well. We don't get 100% business rate retention. So there's a knock-on effect on other partners who may wish to have conversations with us about the rate of relief we're doing. But I think certainly we ought to be doing as much as we possibly can at this time to support this in particular.
No, absolutely. And it's just what tools are there and what levers we can pull to make it targeted without recommendations for other partners. I get that.
Absolutely. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, so on the council tax support, if we were going to change it, we would have to consult the preceptors because the county bear the lion's share of that as the biggest preceptor. So
Okay.
It's not as quite as simple as if we make a decision, we'd have to get their agreement to that.
And is that if we change the decision as to how much as well as the criteria? Is it?
If it impacted on them financially, so if we made it more generous, which meant they get less, we have to engage with them and get their agreement to that. So that would be county police, fire. The leader's right. At the moment, there is a specific relief around retail, hospitality and leisure. So I'm not sure any of those businesses pay any business rates that are in those categories at the moment. And if they do, it's certainly a reduced level. But that's one of these reliefs that is in these almost this 1 year cycle. So it'd be useful if the government were going to make changes that this becomes either permanent or there's given a horizon, perhaps with some direction of travel as to what's going to happen with this relief. Because, 1 year staged support schemes are not helpful in terms of business. But there are other reliefs like small business rate relief as well that are out there. And these are all funded by the government. So in terms of that specific sector you're talking about, there's probably not much more we can do if they're not paying business rates at this point in time.
Yeah.
It may become more of an issue if the government say remove that relief or reduced it significantly. I think we probably have to wait and see if that happens.
And I think on that, I think somewhere like Lichfield be vulnerable if that relief were removed eventually. I think we see that we're really reliant on hospitality industry in Lichfield in particular, and were that to go, it'd have a clear knock-on effect.
Oh, it's just there was just one other question actually on within the capital programme, page 38, to do with the cinema. And I know, Anthony, I don't know whether you got. I've asked you this by email previously. The funding that's going to come through to the council from the wind up of the LEP.
Yeah.
Is there any updates on that? Because that was quite a significant amount of money which we were hoping to receive.
So we've received the documents we need to complete to get that money released. To be fair, it's quite an onerous document. So we've brought in Aspinall Verdi, the people that helped us do all the evaluate. They're going to help us complete that so that it's done in a robust, detailed way. That will, once they've done that, we'll submit it, and hopefully it is a case of then the money's released. I think it's probably a more onerous process than we thought it would be, to be honest. But yes, we are moving it forward with some expert support.
And the amount that we are hoping to collect is that the same amount that was originally envisaged?
Chunk though. We over a number of years.
Profiled, isn't it? Over a number of years. Yeah. I don't think it was the original number. It was the number that we then kicked up a stink about getting because we didn't believe their initial way of doing it was particularly fair. So yeah.
Yeah, Colin's has got one more question. I think.
Yeah, Chair, on the budget consultation, I guess there's some blanks in here. That's why it's not clear to me. But on the page shows it 45 and 46 of the supporting booklet, that one is expenditure breakdown. There are no numbers there. Presumably the numbers will go in at some point. And this page after that is time for you to share your opinion on various things. And it's got an A, B, and C, and presumably there'll be different choices on A, B, and C that people can say, well, I want this, but not that.
Yeah.
So when would there be the opportunity to comment on what those choices are? Is that something that you think you'd come back to us with, or are you going to crack ahead with it regardless?
Now's as good a time as any if you've got some suggestions, or we can circulate a draft ahead of time if you want time to think about it.
That's probably a better way to do it.
Yeah, that's fine. I think getting the questions right, asking the right questions to the right people at the right time is the challenge that we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it's certainly in terms of asking the right questions. I think we had a fairly long debate about the best way to do this. For me, there's no point doing a budget consultation if we're then not actually going to act on the answers that we get, frankly. But if we're asking questions that we know we're not able to act upon the answers, then there's no point in asking them. So I think we've got to keep ourselves honest here about the questions that we're asking and make sure they're questions that, depending on what people want to do, that we can actually act on it and change because of it.
Yeah, I think if the leader's happy to circulate that to all of us as members of the overview and scrutiny committee before it goes live, and we can make any amendments or suggested changes, that I think that might be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. The recommendations were, to remind you, 5 views, which I think we've done to the Cabinet in relation to the revenue budget and the settlement and so on, the windfall. The second bullet point, which is one just really ends up with in the politics of the various groups, the potential level of the district council's tax increase for 25, 26, and they are for debates later, but if anybody wants to suggest a figure now, they can. No, I don't think so.
One.
Yes.
I mean, the benchmark is interesting, but I mean, what's that got to do with anything, really? I mean, they might want this, we might want that, and so it's useful. But I don't want to tell Anthony he's wasted his time. I'm just saying that it don't mean much, really. You know, the unit cost of that's excellent. Thank you for that. Just want some more answers from us or comments. I think that's it for the moment for this MTFS, and we'll presumably after October the 30th, you might know a little bit more. So that will.
We'll have loads of money then. We'll have loads of money.
Both anyway.
Thank you.
Adam. Next item. Next item is the task group notes. The first one is the Lichfield City Centre Master Plan. Colin wants to say anything on this, on the notes that are here.
Well, just a couple of things very quickly, that we now have another task group meeting tomorrow night, which is going to go into the detailed briefs that the Chief Executive and Create Streets have actually produced for us. So thank you very much for that, which will show us a clear way forward, I think, scheme. We'll also be discussing the options on the bus station tomorrow as well, and the future of the task group, but I'm happy to answer any questions on the notes that you have before you.
Okay, I've just got Sue at the moment. No, actually Miles was first because he had the pre-meeting.
Thanks.
And Colin, and then oh no, that's me. Sue and then Miles. Forget that. Forget Sue and then Miles.
Yeah, thank you. It's a general question really about the membership, and I've raised this before because the city centre doesn't just belong to city councillors, and with the loss of Councillor Whitehouse from that task group, there are no councillors on the task group who are not representing the city. I think it's important that, you know, we understand as an organisation that the potential capital revenue from that side belongs to the whole district and not just to the city centre representatives. So whether there's been any progress on that, I hear that there's a meeting tomorrow night, so there won't be a non-city representative there, which I think is a lost opportunity personally. On the bus station, I referred to it slightly earlier on, that some of the information that came from the county council on the transport briefing, and it's still available, I think, will for members to watch that briefing, look at that briefing. It was very interesting, really quite telling. You know, just a sort of a caution really that the details, whether they're awaited or whether they've arrived from the county council, may or may not be accurate in terms of, you know, member experiences of what issues are around buses.
On the first point, though, I can ask for other volunteers, not for tomorrow, and for a non-city volunteer to be on the task group. But of course, they'll need to do quite a bit of reading of what's happened before. I think we can do that. I think.
I mean, I would certainly welcome that, and I think that the point that Councillor Woodward makes is well made. And I was pleased that we did have somebody who was with the city previously, and I'm pleased that we now got two women in the task group, whereas before it was very male dominated. But I don't control who comes forward as volunteers. That's one of the issues, any more you do, Chair. And if we don't get the volunteers, they can't join the task group. I also would suggest that we may be putting this task group into abeyance after tomorrow, if we're able to agree. We may have one more meeting and to finalise our agreement, because we've probably come to a point where there's not a lot more detail we can go into at this stage, but we'll see tomorrow.
Obviously, we can ask questions at this committee, of course, of groups for the issue. The second issue today, there. So what is it, Susan?
Information about
On the bus station.
Yeah. Oh, well, noted.
Yeah, thank you. We've got Miles, Paul, and then Jamie. Then, please, in that order.
Thanks, Chair. The second page of the report talks about high-level briefs on each phase of the development. I was reassured by that, particularly with your comment, Colin, about the group perhaps going into abeyance after tomorrow's meeting. I think that's a really positive thing at each phase, that you have a briefing and a chance to comment. I just wanted to ask, does that mean a briefing solely for those members on the group, or for all councillors, or?
Well, at this stage, it's only for the task group tomorrow night. We'll look at those briefs in detail for what's likely to go on all the sites. But then that will depend on the views of the task group, whether they think that's a viable way forward. whether that can then be shared with all members. I have no personal objection to that, but it's an issue of how widely these things are shared. But yeah, I don't see why not personally.
We'll bring you back, but then Paul Casapore.
Yeah, obviously I'm on the task group and we'll be having a full discussion tomorrow, but I think there's a comment at the top of the second page. Members confirmed they were comfortable with the parcelled phases of development. Not sure whether that's fully accurate. There was quite a discussion around that, and without going into all the detail about density and about the amount of public open space on the site. So I just wanted to make that point, and we'll discuss that more tomorrow.
We are generally confirmed or mostly confirmed. Members mostly.
I think
There was a big debate on those.
Yeah, but
there was I think at the end there was a majority view that what we had before us was acceptable, but we have a further debate tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll just put a heated debate then, perhaps. Yeah. Jamie Techland and other city councillors.
Mine was just an observation really in relation to the task group and for reassurance to Councillor Woodward. To be honest, we're looking at the development of itself. It's in our remit to decide how monies are spent once the whole thing is happening, trying to make the city centre the best that it can do. The land that we've got available. So that's what we're looking at as a task group. And when we first started this in 1832, I think, there were a number of Burntwood councillors and just other area councillors involved. It's just with the change of people, the volunteers that came through for this particular section tend to be city centre ones. But we're looking at the development of the centre rather than how the money's spent afterwards. So.
It's not a conspiracy, is it?
No. Well, if it is, no, I'm not in it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jamie. Thank you very much. But can I just come back on a point that Colin made, that the proposed briefing will be shared eventually with other councillors, but it's a timing issue really, because offers that are on the table may be withdrawn very quickly if there's no decision made. So it would be helpful if those briefings could be circulated either to all of the members of the O&S committee or to members generally, because there won't be time really for tomorrow's task group minutes to come to this O&S committee before some decisions need to be made. And it would be, in my view, it's better to involve as many members as possible in these sorts of discussions.
Okay, well, we'll discuss that, take that on board for tomorrow night. Right, how we progress tomorrow.
Oh, leader, sorry, yes.
My chair, thank you. I discussed this very point with Colin at some point in the last 72 hours, I forget when. But that's absolutely the intention, to ensure that all members are able to see that. But I think out of courtesy to the task group, it's only right that they get the opportunity first to digest and provide feedback before we then circulate that around the wider membership. But I think particularly in terms of how we're bringing the former Tempest Ford site forward, it's really important that we put that in the context of what's happening on the remainder of the site. I think that's what this briefing is intended to do, or the brief for the remaining parcels. But as I say, only right that it goes through the task group first for their comments and views.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. The second task group is the one I chair, which is the pedestrianisation, which the majority of members are actually not city members. It is actually set up to look at the situation with disabled drivers and disabled shoppers and how they are struggling in there. So that's what it's mainly about. And you see the outcomes there being updated on the bollards. And I see we had a note from the cabinet member today about that decision there. And then the further work that is referred to. Any questions on the depedestrianisation? That's great. If not, oh, I'll put it down to a really good chair.
Well, I mean, there's all the issue of taxi ranks and where taxi ranks are located, which is mentioned in the notes. And I think that's something that needs to be considered very carefully in the context of the pedestrianisation, that there is a place where taxis can be easily accessible to people, and rather than having them drive through the centre.
I don't think anybody's able to come up with an answer on that one. That's a very difficult question, and we've had all sorts of problems with them, whichever answer you came up with. But it's still an ongoing issue. I got Jamie and then I got Doug.
Just in relation to taxi ranks, there are 3 locations proposed, but those haven't been put forward to the taxi drivers as yet, and I believe they're not going to be public till Friday. So there are 3 locations proposed, but
Right, good.
all the taxi people will be consulted.
There's some work going on there, so yeah. Maybe we're not optimistic with the responses we'll get, but we looked at.
Well,
Okay.
Jamie's just said that exactly what I was going to say, but until the taxi drivers themselves are consulted, it should not be in the public domain, because it is an important issue and lots of people have brought it up, and it's been going on for ages and ages, but we are getting really.
You know, obviously, what we heard about was the problems that we've got at the moment. I said there was no solutions at the moment, but so hopefully there'll be some progress, and we'll just have to be optimistic, I think. Move on to the next agenda item then, if that's okay, which is compliments, complaints, MP and FOI inquiries report, 324. So the county councils had their report recently. No. Anyway, their particular abuse scrutiny task group. And this is the first time I think we confirm that it's come to this committee now. It used to be audit. Congratulate people who say compliment with an I here. If you go to a restaurant and you see compliment spelled this way, the bottle of wine, just say thanks. I didn't want to pay anyway. That's a little tip there for you. It's not a big call, but you can try it. Then we want to present this report.
Good too.
I know there's some good bits in it. Don't worry. I'll draw attention to those.
Thank you for this brief.
I want to draw attention to paragraph 2, though, which is the recommendations there. Comment on the customer feedback annual review, and note the final amends on the public of the customer feedback annual review, approved by the leader himself of the council in consultation with the director for resident and business services, and note that the customer feedback annual review will also be shared with the briefing note. Well, it's not that last one really, but yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. Accountability and transparency are, I think, really key for us, particularly in local democracy. And this is, I think, one of the ways that we demonstrate accountability and transparency. When we get things wrong, we do it occasionally as an organisation. The numbers that you've got in front of you in the report, obviously you've got the view back over the last 2 or 3, certainly 3 years. It looks as if the number of complaints is tracking upwards, because the number of recorded complaints has. Obviously contained within the report, you'll see we think that we're just getting better at recording what we actually view as a complaint. I know it sounds really straightforward, what a complaint is and what it isn't, but actually it's, you didn't answer the phone within 2 rings. Is that a complaint? Is it not a complaint? They know, but there's obviously a bit of a grey area there. We are getting better at recording the complaints, which is why we think they're going up. Obviously, there is a huge increase in the number of compliments as well. So clearly, we're getting better at recording compliments as well. You answer the phone in 1 ring, perhaps. Who knows? But we're getting better at recording those as well. I think things to really point out: the number of stage 1 complaints that we upheld is not the same number as the number of apologies issued. The stage 1 complaints upheld is seen higher. That's obviously not right. Where we uphold a complaint, we absolutely should be apologising, and processes are being put in place to ensure that that's done in a more sensible manner, or in a more that we get better at it, basically, that we're doing that time and time again. You'll see that there were 8 stage 2 complaints, either partially upheld or entirely upheld, compared to 2 in the previous year. However, at that point, no local government social care ombudsman complaints were actually investigated. So we upheld them, but there weren't any LGO investigations into that. Almost 90% were responded to within the target timescales. If they weren't, we ensured that residents were kept up to date in terms of progress. And we also had 97 MP inquiries. I think is a euphemism for a complaint via the MP from a resident, which but we call them MP inquiries. So not 97 inquiries from MPs, 81% of which we responded to within the target timescales. I think particularly in terms of the recommendations tonight, I'd be really grateful for some feedback around the public facing document that we're proposing. So how have we taken this report and put it into an easy to digest customer feedback document, which we're going to publish publicly on our website. I think it's just really, really important that we demonstrate to our residents that we're being really transparent about where we haven't quite got things right, and ensure that we continue a strong feedback loop from our residents to make sure they know that we listen to them if something's not quite right, to ensure that we encourage as many residents as possible to come forward and talk to us when things aren't quite right and give us an opportunity to rectify them. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
That's great.
There we go. Lizzie wrote the notes for me, that's why.
It says that. Yeah. Okay. Well, before I bring in 3 speakers, I'll put the hands up, but I'll this before the meeting starts, you know. Just on the MP inquiries, I mean, the thing is about being, I will just say this, being an MP is that you want to be seen to be doing things, as you do as a councillor. So when somebody writes to you, you sort of send the letter off or the email nowadays to the council and get it back. And so you've got to be seen to be doing something. But I did notice on the county council complaints report that they were trying and discourage that. I mean, I am guessing that they have more inquiries going straight to the MP rather than through the county council, they being more remote. No offence from compared to district, or especially compared to parish councillors. But that might be an issue. You might want to review that and see how you can try and deter the new MPs if this what happens from, you know, say, well, why don't you go to your local council? But that may be difficult. Sometimes I just want the MP to do it, and sometimes they don't want the local councillor. So I'll just mention that as an issue that might be looked at in the future to save a bit more time and effort, but we'll see. I'm glad somebody's not here to complain about that all. I've got Councillor Miles, Councillor Bull, and then Councillor Checkland.
Yeah.
I've not got Councillor Miles.
Yep. You foolishly asked for feedback, but no, it's mainly positive. I think it's a really good plan to publish this and to make sure it's out there and we're being transparent about it. I think I presume, as well as publishing on the website, we'll be promoting it via various media channels, and that's only right. On the actual document, oh no, I had a question about on data assessment on page 61. It mentions ward specific feedback. 61 of the pack.
Just ask, when you refer to these pages, it doesn't quite work depending on how you've downloaded the.
Okay, apologies.
Is this where you're asking? So under the risks and legal implications, we've got then data assessment, as they're looking at ways in which we can capture data to complaint types which affect.
Yes. So I imagine on lots of feedback, it's general and applies to the whole of the district, but might be items for either negative or positive that assist ward councillors. So I'd like to say I'll support that fully. That'd be really good if that can be passed on when it happens.
And if I may, I think that'd be a really useful exercise in terms of seeing where the complaints are coming from. I think I'll just urge some caution when we do get that data forward, that we'll all have seen in our role as ward councillors that sometimes people who have got a bit more spare time, shall we say, got the time to contact their ward councillors and make complaints. There are other people who are facing similar issues but don't quite have as much free time or capacity to complain, and so we shouldn't automatically think that that's where the worst service is being delivered, and actually we should just really think about who it is that's approaching us, and perhaps there are people who aren't or don't feel able to approach us, but where actually they're equally receiving perhaps not the service that we perhaps wouldn't expect.
Just a couple of other comments. I think in my view, it's positive that as well as feeding back the negative stuff, we do more to record the complimentary stuff, because it's quite tempting just to sort of pat yourselves on the back and say that was great and not embed the good practice. So I think that's a positive thing as well. And a really pedantic one to finish. You asked for feedback on the report. There is a typo in the quote. It's a good quote that we start with. The local government and social care ombudsman. It's very apt. misses the word that. It's not a typo in the original.
Yes, early warning of problems that might otherwise stay unseen.
Thank you. I shall
Oh,
sort
you
that.
added.
Thank you very much.
Is that
Yeah.
a different complaint or?
Wouldn't mind recording that.
Thank you. Can I just say, I'm going to say Councillor Trent. So I wrote all your names down, your first names. I wanted to, on this webcast here, to let people know who they are, but I got it wrong there.
I've
So,
got one of these
Councillor Trent,
pesky
thank you.
reversible names. So.
Yeah, Councillor Ball is next, Colin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Two comments. One, I like the way the presentation is, but on complaints, when I was working and leading organisations, I used to always encourage people to embrace complaints as something good that we could learn from and make improvements because of. And I just wonder whether we, and I think an increase in complaints is not a bad thing, especially if they're mainly being upheld or they're not going to the ombudsman and it recognises that we are performing well. And I wonder whether it's worth putting a sentence or two in the customer feedback saying we welcome complaints because that's an opportunity to learn and make improvements.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the fact that we're taking this through this process and publishing it without saying it says it and gives that message really clearly that we're welcoming and approaching, but it doesn't hurt to be really explicit about that. Absolutely. And I think in particular just about learning from complaints. Obviously in the report you'll see about, particularly around planning, where complaints have dropped significantly,
Yes.
compliments have increased significantly. These are doing some work with them to understand what actually has driven or what that about, and is there something we can then apply across the rest of the organisation.
Thank you.
I'll just say that because Colin was asking that question and not me, if I wasn't chairing this meeting, or I was the chair, I would say, yeah, I'd encourage the complaints. So it makes a great press release just before the next election. Great. Complaints have doubled because, anyway, there you are. Colin doesn't mean it that way, he means it generally, so that's great. Councillor Jamie Techland.
Okay, mine's more of a mathematical point, really. A lot of
I can't help.
evidence there is presented in percentages, and other bits is presented in numbers. If you presenting a percentage, it's a great way of not saying anything or hiding something, unless there's a number next to it. So, for instance, what's it? Statistics. So one of the sections, the complaints were down by 14%. 14% of 57, it dropped to 9% of 76. That's the same number, pretty much. I mean, it's 8 complaints one year and 7 complaints the year after. So it's just the way in which numbers are presented. I know I'm being pernickety. Percent, and later on as well, 3.7, which I just saw, 89% of stage 1 complaints were responded to in 20 working days, 76%. If you just put the number of how many it is you're talking about, we're talking about 3 million. We're talking about 10. That's just a mathematical observation, because I used to fix reports like that. So.
When you say fix them,
Positive light using percentage.
Himself is not suggesting you might be doing it.
Sort that, no problem.
It is a good point, actually. Good time. Thank you. Sue wanted the. Then Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up the point you made before the item, the discussion on the item started, that putting MP inquiries into this report along with compliments and complaints, it sort of muddies the water, it seems to me, because I don't need to know about MP's casework. I need to know if they are genuinely making a complaint or a compliment. I mean, it seems to me if there are 97 this year in MP inquiries, they're not using their local members effectively enough, because councillors do their casework on a day-to-day basis. And I would certainly encourage our new MP for Lichfield and the newly re-elected MP for Tamworth to, work with the local councillors so that they're not having to pass on inquiries about, can you clear this fly tip, or can you sort of empty these litter bins? That just seems to be a waste of time for members of Parliament. And that leads me on to say, is there any way in which we're able to capture councillor complaints? Because often there will be in casework, you know, you'll pass the question on to an officer and say, can you help with this particular thing? If it's not resolved, then it may become a complaint that the councillor is passing on behalf of a local elector, local resident. And you know, I mean, there is a sort of there's a blurring, if you like, between just basic casework and the feedback arising from that casework, and can councillors help in sort of exposing sort of issues that may be a cause for complaint?
Yeah. Could I just give my view on that, and then perhaps Lisa can tell from a sort of from an internal perspective how it works. I would certainly expect that if a resident came to me with a complaint about the council, or even an inquiry that wasn't resolved to their satisfaction and was then escalated to a complaint, I'd fully expect, and I think I've seen evidence of this, that it has then been turned into and recorded as a formal complaint. And I think that's certainly in the last 18 months that has happened. I don't think that always necessarily happened before, if I'm really candid, but I think certainly we've got better recently at ensuring very early on that is recorded as a complaint. And there certainly shouldn't be any obfuscation of that by saying, oh, it was just a councillor inquiry. Should absolutely be recorded as a complaint. Entirely agree. In terms of the MP inquiries, I think I entirely agree. And I think if there's a way of doing that internally for us to, if it's a complaint coming via the MP, it should be a complaint. If it's just some casework that the MP has asked us to go and respond to, then I wouldn't expect to see that in with the mix. I think there's perhaps some work for us to do in terms of unpicking that. And if an MP is just forwarding casework to officers to deal with, that doesn't feel like the optimal way of assisting residents, shall we say.
Can I ask, do you know if, Lizzie, if just in the county council we have the same reporting for members of parliament and that? Do other local authorities do it as well, including MPs' complaints or inquiries?
In this manner, in terms of in the same report?
Sorry?
In this manner, in the same
Yeah,
report?
yeah.
I think different councils do it in very different ways.
There was a report on the MP's inquiries.
Yeah, I think the comment is well made that we ought to be recording the number of MP inquiries that are actually complaints versus just inquiries, and I think we can certainly take that away and look into that, because otherwise it rather skews the fact that they may well not be complaining about the service we're delivering at all. It may well just be a query that isn't answered elsewhere or otherwise. So I'll certainly take that away. And with regards to your first comment, Councillor Woodward, yes, we do record councillor complaints on behalf of residents as complaints, so they are incorporated in this.
Okay. Councillor Diamond,
I just wanted to follow up from what Sue said earlier, because and say that the new system that we've got with councillor queries is a much improved system, because a lot of times you don't know who to get through to, and it's making a big difference that you responded to a lot quicker than we were previously. So I just want to say that about that. And also, in a way, a compliment from me about planning, because planning is a thing that people have always been very interested in, and that's where we get lots of people that actually come and are concerned about it. And the fact that I think planning itself has improved, the whole team now has improved considerably, and the fact that you have, that is obvious with the number of compliments you've got as opposed to complaints. So I think that is an important issue for the public in general, to see that planning is improving to that extent.
yeah, it's been good to see, and I think also, and just not to do this, but on the appeals, I've not found one yet where an appeal has been upheld following a planning issue, which is very good as well, I think, or at least it shows that planning committee is working as it should be. If there's any other questions, is there? I mean, we appreciate this, and I hope those little comments that we've made and questions will be used for next time. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. And all the staff as well, especially, I'm going to concentrate, especially on the compliments. So thank you.
Will do. Thank you. Our feedback. Thank you very much.
I think we just note this next report, folks. Is that we agree on pre-meeting? No need further. You want? Oh, no, you're joking. Definitely want you on the desk. Oh, wow. In reinforcements.
Few of us. Maybe as well.
I've never been described as that in my life.
Well, let me, before, I'll ask you to come in, Alex, but I just want to be clear. There's a number of ways to the members. As I understand it, this is, it's all very good. It's all coming out. I've only got half of it here because the copy didn't work, but as I understand it, what we've been asked here tonight is just to look at the consultation process to see if what is here is, I'll say it's intelligible to everybody because it's impossible with some of the reports, and it's not your fault. But actually, this is in a fit state to be consulted on, as far as we can see. And then the venues are also appropriate and all the rest of it. So, is that, in my understanding, right? That's what you brought this report here for us to do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a chunky document. You're right. It's a big one, but it's an important one because it gives our residents the chance to tell us what they think about the local plan, basically. So yeah, I'd love your feedback.
Did you want to say anything first of all?
Yeah, it's it's the next stage in what is a really important process in making this new local plan. I hope members generally feel they're well informed. We're doing regular sessions with everyone. For those who can't make it, they're recorded. And this stage really is where we go to the public to say, here's where we are. What would you like out of our local plan? So any residents I speak to, and I'd encourage all councillors to do the same. I will say, please get involved in this. It's a 6-week consultation, begins the end of October. So it will give us a good feedback, and Chris, Pat and the team are trying to effectively go far and wide as much as we can across Lichfield district to talk to people, whether it's through supermarkets, we're going to schools, community centres, parish councils, just as everywhere we can really. So I'd like to invite members of the committee to let us know if you think we're going far enough, if you think there's places we're missing, because we need to get the views of our residents. That's really important. That's why we're putting this local plan together.
Yeah, the recommendations there on 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 have drawn to your attention. Who was the first one to ask questions? If volunteering, are they? That's a Trent, Councillor Miles Trent, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I had a question about timescales or timing, and so it connects with para 3.11 in the agenda report. So it notes there about consultation on proposed reforms to national planning policy framework and the planning system. In short, we know there are changes coming, and I'm sure this has been on your minds. I just wanted to get that out there straight away. We're going to be consulting on what is, as you say, a very huge and detailed document, and then things may fundamentally change in the not too distant future. So I'm sure we all want to just minimise any wasted effort. I know this is not easy because there's a timetable. We need to have a new plan in by 2029, and one of the risks noted is risk B. Potentially government intervention if we haven't done it in time. I don't know how likely that is at the moment, but yeah. So I just wanted to get that issue out really for discussion. That do we actually need to wait, and is there a way of waiting on consulting? Because that would be a major issue for me, I think.
If I could just comment politically with the officers. I think you're right. It's difficult because we're in a bit of a limbo with the government consultation. We've submitted our own consultation on behalf of the council, but other recommendations from the new government are that any local plans that are currently being made, which as is one, they'd want to get finished as soon as possible. I think they've banded around kind of mid 2026 is when they want things to move forward. So we're in a bit of a catch-22 really, because if we don't get on with it, they could just impose things on us as a government. So I think that the quicker we move forward with the facts that we've currently got, and we can only go on what the current legislation is, I think that it's important that we also look at this document as more of a fact finding from our residents. I mean, we know that's not going to change. Their views aren't going to change on what they want, and whether we have to give them a slightly different iteration of a plan based on new housing numbers, that we'll soon find out. But I think it's important also to go to another point that you've made. It is a big document, so it's important that we take that key information, granular information that we want residents to get involved with, engage with, and get out there in the most bite-sized way possible. Because how do you say to someone, read this 600-page document? They're just not going to, are they? So we need to.
We've had that said to us this week.
Of course, yeah. So we need to get our residents to, in a pithy way, which the team, well, I'm sure will tell you about, respond, and then we'll take the information that we've got. I don't really know what else to say in terms of the consultation, because we'll all find out, as well as the other councils in the UK, what actually is going to happen soon enough, hopefully.
I think Mr. Farrell's covered everything there, really. I think the key points are, as you say, the government consultation's closed now.
Speak a little bit, please.
We've made our comments to that consultation. The issues and options document itself at Appendix A, actually, where appropriate, does talk about that consultation. So it presents what we know is the situation now and what the situation could be based on that consultation. So we've tried to make sure that we pick up those matters where they're important in it. And I think that, yeah, just really worth re-stressing what Councillor Farrell said, which is, government are saying and have said that sort of almost irrespective of their consultation, but their expectation is that council should still be pressing ahead with their plans. So, that is why we've presented this as we have at this time.
I just want to bring Colin specifically in on the MPPF feedback, because you had a question on that, and I'll certainly come back to you then, Paul.
Yeah,
Either was that
be on this point.
That's okay.
Yeah, and just before I do that, I'd just like to commend Chris and Patrick and the rest of the team for the work on this, both on the MPPF consultation, which they very kindly shared a draft with me that I made comment on, and also on this document itself. I've got more to say on this document itself later, but on the MPPF, I was broadly supportive of the approach that the council's taken. As you know, I made a number of significant comments and observations and suggested rewording and other points to be made. I just wonder how much of that's been incorporated. The chair told me earlier I could have read the final version, but having read already 660 pages, I thought that was perhaps pushing the boat out a bit too far. So I thought the opportunity tonight to see what are my thoughts and being able to incorporate in the final response, please.
Yeah, so I did email you back following your comments explaining where and how we would change it. So those changes that were in that email were made and were sent through to Alex as well. Councillor Farrell, rather, sorry. And those changes were made to that consultation before it was submitted.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to get that publicly acknowledged. Thank you very much. I knew that was the case, but
Okay.
no one else did.
Sleep now tonight. Paul was definitely next, please.
Yeah, so I've got two sets of questions. One's just following off the discussion we've just had, just sort of challenging that discussion, because I think what we're expecting, one of the major changes to planning policy is the grey belt, and that will open up additional land in this district which can be developed. And you've had the call for sites. Once that policy comes through, then we go through another call for sites. There's going to be more land that's going to be open for development. So I just sort of challenged I think there's an ongoing discussion just to make sure the decision to go now rather than to delay. Because I take your point, Alex, about housing numbers. Fine. So this is about we get do the consultation about what the community wants from in the area, but then the grey belt policy would fundamentally change what is developable in our area. So I just put that out there because I think it does raise a very valid the validity of the point about do we go now or do we delay?
I think it's a good point. I still don't think grey belt has been distinctly defined by the way. And I've just asked Pat because I don't think we've had any sites that have come on what I would imagine grey belt would be.
Yeah.
I think we have had some on green belt. So I presume if a developer had grey belt, they would have applied for the call for sites, unless I've missed something.
I think obviously grey belt is potentially
Of course,
a new designation, which I think you're absolutely right to say. At the moment, it seems and our response to the MPPF consultation picked this up. Loosely defined, might be a way of putting it. Now, obviously, that proposed designation has come around since we undertook the call for sites. We need to, I think, wait and see what the revised MPPF says about that. And that's one of the reasons why, so in the evidence-based section of the issues and options document, where we talk about what evidence we need, what evidence we have done, what we will need to collect, we will need to potentially update our Greenbelt review, but that's not a piece of work we've done now, because obviously we would need to wait until a time at which Greybelt, which will be part of Greenbelt policy potentially nationally, so that we can understand what Greybelt is. Do we have any? If we do, where is it? So there's a number of pieces of evidence that we've not progressed at this point because we think it would be better to wait. My view is that doesn't preclude us or prevent us at this stage from undertaking, as Councillor Farrell described, the issues and options consultation at this stage, which is about gathering information. You know, options are available to us, but further down the line, if we think we need to undertake another consultation, we can do that, and react as and when national policy.
I know the Chief Executive would like to come in. I don't know whether it's relevant. I'll certainly come back if you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this is helpful as well to all, but I think at this stage, what we're talking about and what we're considering is our spatial strategy. So it's the bigger picture of where we will accept housing and employment growth rather than the discussions about individual sites. And, you know, our issue at the moment is, can our key settlements cope with more housing? Yes or no? Should some of our villages be willing to take some housing numbers? Yes or no? Is a new settlement, or actually is that the right spatial strategy? I think, as Pat was saying, Chair, if we get that spatial strategy right, then we can start to talk about, well, where could we put a new settlement? Where could villages take? And that's when we get into the detail of sites, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
yes, of course.
Yeah, and then maybe, to just finish off that, maybe there might be another call for sites if Bell is part of it. But and I just have two specific points which within when it goes out for consultation, asked if it could be considered and highlighted. One is buses. There's often a lot of reference about transport, but buses are crucial for the connectivity of our district, especially if we go for a new settlement, which is obviously something that's referred to in there, because we haven't got train networks between Burntwood and Lichfield and the villages. Buses are crucial. So I think that should be something that should be specifically highlighted in the transport section. And then the other thing, which would be a sort of a specific sort of question or highlighted under sort of health and inequality section, is about fast food outlets. We've had through planning some contention. We've had the McDonald's on Eastern Avenue. We've had the KFC in the centre of Lichfield, where councillors have expressed reservation, but have been told there aren't planning reasons to be able to stop this. Except, as I understand it, if your local plan does have a health policy which speaks about the accessibility and the volume of fast food outlets, then that gives you grounds for being able to make a particular planning decision. So I'd ask if that could be considered, because that's something as a council we need to be mindful of the health of our community, obviously, and I think that would be a specific tool. So if there was another application in the future and we was turned down by planning, that would give us some grounds to be able to say it's very clear, it's been through consultation in our local plan. We've set a limit on how many fast food outlets there are in particular parts of our district.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll go away and think about how we can achieve that.
Yeah. Because I think it's, as I say, I think it's a live issue. As we know, it's got press through local press news for live, and it's been a very live issue on planning committee.
That's a fair point.
Also, danger of becoming working class, obviously, if get more McDonald's. Anyway, Councillor Di Evans, please.
Yeah, just a correction on 3.15, but bullet point 4. You called it Chase Terrace High School. It's Chase Terrace Academy. So that needs to be corrected because they might be somewhat irritated. Not
Yeah.
put an academy.
Lose confidence in the.
One of the other things I'm really pleased that we are going to involve young students because that's important. Is their future. The plans that are going to affect them far more than us. Future. But I wondered why just year 11 geography was selected when you've got A-level students and presumably you will go to colleges as well. And year 11 geography, what's wrong with years 12 and 13 who were doing A-levels geography and perhaps politics as well, because that again is something that can be involved. And as far as the actual venues go, can I be assured that all the venues that you're going to have disabled access? Because nowadays that is a very important issue for me, but it is for an awful lot of other people. And we have evidence of that, of councillors that we've got now. That is an important issue to me, but also the lower younger age group is vitally important. Their input is important, and it's important for them to feel valued as well, because they will see that going ahead in the future.
Yeah, very good points. I presume all venues are disabled friendly, but we'll check that because you never presume. And the point of the school, I don't know. I'd imagine, Chris, it's because
Yes,
there's only so far we can go.
yeah, yeah, to a certain degree. I think as I'm sure some of you know with schools, it's you've got to start at an entry point, and we've sort of seen that as that's where some A-level classes are perhaps 12 to 18 pupils, year 11s are probably 30, so there's more, we're reaching more pupils potentially. I think since this is a moving project, obviously ahead of the 30th, some schools have come back and said, actually, we prefer you to speak to our A-level students. So it's not a a hard and fast sort of rule as such. That's just really been from a numbers point of view in terms of getting to as many children as possible, or young people, I should say. So yeah, that's perhaps I'll make a change to make sure that that's sort of noted about the different classes. And yes, there is a time aspect. I think actually the challenge we're facing more than anything is the schools coming back to us to say they're happy for us to go in. That's proving more difficult in some schools than others. We're continuing that. We've got more than enough time to push that through. Yeah, I agree. The young people and young engagement's vital, and I think that's probably not something we've done previously. I think on a broader note, and I think Simon certainly agrees here as well, is that it's and Councillor Pullen this is the opportunity to get it as far and wide as possible to as many residents as possible. Further consultations are more, detail's the wrong word, are more, they have to fill in a certain aspect. I know at the last aspect 19 in terms of that side is important. So yeah, going to people with a 5-question set is good at this point because it opens it up, and then it means that we get their details that we can speak to about detailed areas as well.
I'll just also make a point that obviously we're cognizant of the time of year we're at. It's nearly Christmas, so I think what we've got planned is good. I think we're going a long way. We also know that some parish council cycles will mean that we're trying to get to them earlier than the actual consultations to make them aware, because they found out, let's say on the 1st of November, they might miss their meeting cycle if they don't meet in December. So we are working a plan out to get this to the parishes as well.
Yeah, I did a presentation to what was then Chester Technology College to their 6th form. It was a very exciting presentation, I thought. I did leave a ballot box for them to put their comments, and there weren't that many, but at least they did have an input there. I'm sure there's a better way of doing it, digital wise and all the rest of it. So good luck with that, whether they're 6th formers or
homework is this, we've been told by the school.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you. We've got Sue next on the list, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Following the guidance that you gave us, I'm not going to comment too much on the local plan, the draft local plan as it is, because there'll be other opportunities. So I'm focusing on the consultation bit. I think it would be really helpful if there was some sort of summary document, an executive summary at the beginning of this, because, you know, although 672 pages, the consultation document is a long document to go through. So an executive summary would be really useful. And I did just note, looking at the the document again, forward is spelt in 2 different ways at the beginning of the document, so that needs to be checked. It would also be helpful, I think, if the questions were listed. You know, I just think of the way I consultations, and you know, it's useful to have the questions so you're not contradicting yourself, for example, as you go through. I'm slightly concerned that councillors, members, still haven't had the full opportunity to make comment on the draft, and I know there's been a couple of sessions, virtual sessions, explaining this to councillors, but it's how are you going to capture our feedback? Is it that you're going to expect responses to the consultation from councillors, or are you going to do it in a slightly different way? I think that is really quite important. And just on a specific point, on 2.3, there's reference to delegation to the Cabinet Member for Housing and the Local Plan. Well, one thing that has worked really very well within the council as it elected last May is that there's been cooperative work between Cabinet Member and Shadow Cabinet Member. And just like to add formally, it would be helpful if that delegated authority was discussed with Councillor Ball as the shadow representative as well, because I think the relationship, particularly between Councillor Farrell and Councillor Ball, has been very positive, quite dynamic, but really very positive, and it's good that, you know, further representation is made on those sorts of issues. So thanks, Chair.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? I'd like to go through, not through the detail in the appendices, but I'd like to go through appendix B, C, and D shortly, at least any issues there.
Thank you. So I just wanted to come in on the draft document itself, just with 2 quick points. One is I don't want to be outdone on the proofreading, so question 29 is an identical repeat of question 28. So we're looking at page 61 of the document. Repetition.
I think we've done well for that. 600 pages. We've only had a couple.
Oh no, it's very impressive. Don't get me wrong. And I had a sort of more presentational point about paragraph 4.15, which is where we set out the top issues, or the kind of key issues is said. And although it does say these are not in order of priority, and that is specified, but I just thought, and you may already give some thought to the kind of presentation or the optics of it, because the climate change and natural environment point are right at the bottom. So we go through all these things, and then right at the bottom of the list is the impact of climate change. I just flagged that up in particular because I know there's going to be a lot of thought to a new settlement, and so, you know, I know we're not ranking these, but those considerations will be major. So I just think it matters how we present these things to residents. Yeah, just thought I'd flag that up.
Thanks.
Okay, Colin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick points to begin with. It's good to see that we've finally got a possible site for Gypsy and Traveller site, which we've been searching for a long time. Unfortunately, it's in the Greenbelt, but you know, that will need to be addressed at some point. Also on the risk assessment, that's very much the way I'd always hoped this would be used, and you've certainly put mitigating measures in that reduce the risks across all the patch, and I think you should be commended for that, because that's not true of every report that comes before us. Some of the suggestions are not reducing the risks at all, they're only marginally so. Thank you very much for that. Now, just coming back to what Councillor Trent's just been saying about we're not ranking these, I wonder whether we should, because I think well, certainly Councillor Fallon and I have discussed many times that our own personal preferences is to have a new settlement rather than trying to grow the villages or grow the urban sprawl that we've had before and get the infrastructure in first. And that's number 4 on the list. Maybe it should be number 1. And maybe we should be saying some of these are our preferred options, so that we're indicating to residents what we're hoping to do, not planning to do, but suggesting might be a better way forward and why. That's just a thought. But then I come back to the conflict with the NPPF, because that's saying that we need to produce so many houses a year. Whatever that number is, put that aside at the moment. We will have to produce so many houses a year, and if we don't meet that number, we're in trouble. But if we have a new settlement, which seems to be a preference, then that will come later in the programme, and we may dip below the number required houses per year. So I think there's an issue there that needs to be addressed in the consultation, and it's also in the footprint ecology document on SA Objective 2 on housing. The comment on 4.111 there, it's also suggesting in that the new settlement, the scale of infrastructure required may also have impacts on the viability of housing delivery, which I don't accept personally, but that's what they're saying. And I just wonder whether we should be making an argument in what we're going out to consultation on, highlight it. I know you say in the document, these are the pros and cons of each of the options, but if we've got a preferred option, it's not formally been agreed as a council preferred option, but it would more likely be accepted, I think, as a preferred option to stop this sort of growth around the big settlements and the pressures that puts on the communities locally. That would probably be my fault. And I know in other councils, when they've done that, they've gone out to consultation. It's been welcomed in other places around the country. So those are a few thoughts and suggestions that perhaps we're thinking about before we go put this out to the public.
I think if I just could quickly respond, I think it's a good point about ranking it. Maybe we should talk about this offline, but you know, we do set out our stall, especially in my foreword, about what we want.
Yeah.
Ideally, so I don't think there's necessarily an issue in ranking it. Possibly we don't want to necessarily push people either way in a consultation, but I do agree that we should maybe give our preferred options. Maybe there's a better way of framing that, and I also agree on the new settlement that, you know, that's definitely a desire from us. But you're right, Councillor Ball, it's not a panacea. You couldn't, that's not the golden bullet, because it's going to take a long time to develop a new settlement if that was the approach we were going to do. And you're right, we need to fill the housing numbers in between. So I think there's possibly a way we should be communicating that to residents to say this is what we'd like to do, but in the meantime, some of this needs to happen as well. Yeah, but I'm sure there's a way we can communicate that as part of the team.
Chair, I don't want to take any more time at the meeting, but I'd be very happy to engage in those offline discussions as well, as shadow cabinet member, to try and help shape them in whatever way you think's appropriate.
Let's have one of our famous coffees.
Yeah, and maybe we involve Patrick and Chris perhaps a bit in that as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's just about the consultation taking its course. Yes, I think that foreword for Alex is very important. That gives it the political view, but I think there is still and I'm sure Pat would agree with that, is the evidence-based, you know, process that has to be followed around what that is really. I think is important. Yeah, I think from, you know, planning head on, because that's ultimately what I'm here for. We're not in a position yet with this local plan, I think, where we have the evidence to be saying this is our preferred option. I think that would be quite a I don't really think this consultation document can do that, and ultimately, as Chris says, this is about asking people what their views are on a range of options to help inform us make that decision. So I do think it would be slightly premature to do that throughout the document. That would be my planning view on that, for what it's worth at just at this time.
Sounds very sensible.
Yeah.
I think you probably have to point to the HRA report, Appendix B, and 6.16 about the Mees Valley and the problems there. in order to be able to conclude no adverse effects on integrity for the River Mease SAC at the next iteration of the plan, it will be necessary to ensure that the plan does not result in further impacts to either flow or quality. Any development that is within the catchment area, not nutrient neutral, should not be supported by the plan. And of course, it does refer to Thorpe in particular. Any growth of this location should it be possible to ensure nutrient neutrality. And also interested in the air quality assessment in that report. Then I didn't realise there was other areas outside of Wall and the A5 that were an issue there. So that particular appendix is of interest to me, only for environmental reasons. So as I say, I think you're right in not jumping ahead yet. But if you are, put that in, or I'll draw attention to it anyway. On the how to respond to the consultation there, can I just ask, somebody, have you got the system set up so that if somebody does make a contribution online, that they can save a copy of their consultation? I know that was the case before, but it's a big pain later on to get it. But I just wonder if there was a way of doing that, because you get this a lot with the consultations, or stations we'll call them, and you do your thing, but then it's lost. You don't get a copy back. You can't just save it there and then. But if there's a way of saving it for the individual, that there might be a technical thing that you've got to find out.
It's always possible.
Yeah. So we use a consultation system called Objective. So people are able to log into that, into their comments. It's their account. They can see all the comments they've ever made on various consultations we've done. They can edit them, they can change them, they can print them off. So yeah, that the system enables people to do that.
You got there's a lot of comment on 3.5693. It does get a bit, I mean, maybe no way around it, which is very complex local plans. It's just, I know you paid so much, so it's difficult to get hold of. Is good, this sort of thing. But if there's a way of doing that, that'd be helpful. Has anybody else got any other questions on this document? You? No? Just joking. Okay, is that helpful for you? What you had there, those things, better notes or follow-up things that have been done, and I'm grateful for members fainting during this section. Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much indeed, and obviously good luck with all that. And yeah, it's up to us actually to publicise this, especially with the parish councils, as Alex has said. I'll sort out Faisley if Sue sorts out Burtwood, and that's kind. You can do that, then, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for that. Now, if I go into the next item on the agenda, which you don't have to stay for, but you can, it's the infrastructure funding statement on agenda item number 9. Who's going to be presenting this, if anybody?
It's still us again.
Yeah.
I'm just still scrolling though, Chairman. I'm almost there. But basically, it's a slightly updated iteration of a previous report that comes with this.
I had here, yeah.
And it's basically just setting out how we think the district should wisely spend its community infrastructure levy and the section 106 money, and how it should be divvied out basically. So there's been an infrastructure list put together which effectively puts it into themes where we should be sending the money that we get from developments. And here's our proposed themes in the report, and I'll welcome any questions or comments.
I think Councillor Trent remembered it pretty earlier on, so if you want to go first, thank you.
I'm furiously scrolling as well.
I'm still getting there, yeah.
I think I'm there. A point on graph 3.18 in the report. Just to welcome that under the new system, smaller and ad hoc bidders will be advised to approach parish councils, because that was a slight concern I had when this came before ONS before, is that, well, what about the ad hoc application? So I think that's good that they'll be directed the right way. And then I always like to throw in potentially a typo. I think it's a typo. Page 22. Is it meant to say that 10 pence was allocated to Friary Grange?
It helps.
I'm not sure what that 10 pence is for. I
Say page 22, could you give me the last slide?
So that's 660 of the bundle.
Page 660.
I can't find it, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Uh,
I'm trying to search
Oh, yeah,
10
for- it's item 3.16 in an appendix.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
in
guys.
pounds, and it says 0.10. Very short-term improvement.
We'll look at that and come back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I presume it's probably wrong. I think, yeah.
Okay, maybe you'll put your hand up first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm sort of slightly confused about how the funds that we've got are allocated. So in paragraph 3.3 and 3.4, there's reference to the amount that's been collected, and there's reference to the amount that's been allocated. And then where's the actual spend? You have to take the amount that's allocated for future projects away from the allocations. It's just not very clear and transparent to me, and perhaps you can help me out with that. I'm concerned too that this is sort of such a movable feast. I mean, it seems to me, from my perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, that these funding pots, both the SIL and the Section 106 funding pots, are almost like pots to dip into. Right, we've got a problem here with this particular issue. Can we dip into some Section 106 money to make up a shortfall for this particular project? I just don't feel it's sufficiently robust in terms of what's collected, what's allocated, and then what's available for other projects. I'm particularly concerned as well in paragraph 2.21 of the additional document. It says that inclusion of a project does not imply a commitment to it. So where does that leave us as councillors? You know, you see, oh, Section 106 money has been committed to this particular project. Right, you know, my ward's going to benefit from that. I'll sign up to that. But then we're told that allocation or commitment isn't a binding one. So it just feels too woolly in terms of what's happening around this planning game money. And it's you know, we ought to have just much clearer fences, if you like, between what's received, what's allocated, and then what's spent. I worry particularly because, you know, there's a potential to lose around £1 million if some of this money is reclaimed by developers. And this council, along with every other council, can ill afford the loss of that sort of level of money. So I'd just like some comments around those sort of two key points around allocations, spend, receipt.
I mean, can I just ask if there's a need for flexibility in these? That's why it's like that, or I don't really want to help you really, but I'm just suggesting flexibility might be the issue in case that.
Chair, I can understand flexibility.
No, I'm just asking.
Yeah,
I'm asking
don't help them out.
Cabinet member.
With that.
Please.
Flexibility is, or some flexibility is fine, but where does that leave?
Come on with the answer. I'm just giving you the suggestion.
I think it's flexibility.
I'll say that.
Yeah. I think Patrick might want to go into the machinations of how actually the formula is spat out the other side. But in terms of 106, I agree with you. I think that there's too much vagary around that, and it is on our list cabinet wise to review the Section 106 process. I think that's different to the SIL process. SIL goes more into communities, but Section 106, I agree, it's a bit wishy-washy, I would suggest, and going forward we're hoping to change that. But I don't know if Patrick's going to do.
That's very welcome, Chair. I might just comment on that, because one of the concerns I've had that the SIG group, Strategic Infrastructure Group, doesn't have any councillor representation on until much further down the line. And that seems to me to be a loss. There used to be a group called the JOG or something like that, you know, where councillors were involved, but it sort of were excluded from that process. So if you take that on board as well.
Definitely.
Okay.
But the cabinet member was in, introducing Pat if you wanted to.
Oh,
Fix, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think your question was in terms of, was it paragraph 3.3?
It's, yeah, 3.3
So,
and 3.4,
yeah, so
also
it's-
3.6,
it's
sorry.
probably easier to read sort of the more detail in the appendices that deals with that. So what it was trying to express, and you know, I appreciate it perhaps hasn't captured it sort of as cleanly as we could, is SIL receipts we collect in a year. There are certain calls on them that we have to do. So there is a set percentage that must go to parishes, depending on got a neighbourhood plan or not. Because of the kind of Chase special area of conservation, there is a certain amount per dwelling that again has to be taken from that overall total we get in a year and go to that. So what that paragraph is trying to do, and perhaps doesn't do it well enough, and will certainly reflect on how we present this to you in the future, is say, well, we've collected just over 470,000 in the year. Once you take off the Cannock Chase bit that has to go, once you take off the amount that must go to parishes, that leaves, and there's a certain amount you take off for the administrative costs of administering SIL. Once you take all of those off, you're left with that second figure, which is 339,000. So that's the amount that goes into our strategic SIL pot, which is then the amount that pot is when we open up bidding. That's the money available. So not 100% of the SIL returns received in a year go into the strategic pot, because there's those three calls on it. But I do appreciate that probably isn't articulated, well, not probably, it isn't articulated that clearly in the report. So we'll reflect on sort of how we try and make that clearer in the future.
I appreciate that, and perhaps I certainly didn't make myself clear, but you know, it's the comparison between the receipt, the amount available, taken off all the other cost implications, if you like, and then what's committed and spent. You know, there's a big gap there. So you know, I imagine that lots of these strategic infrastructure projects will be sitting on a pile of things to do for a very long time.
So obviously there's been, in previous years, we've allocated money to various projects, so they will have a grant agreement in place with terms of the spend. So overall SIL pot is a 3 million figure in 3.4, but because of the historic grants that we have given through previous rounds, that's taken off, and those have got that. Obviously, you know, if the milestones in grant agreements aren't met or aren't reached, then money can come back into the SIL pot. The Appendix A details where that has taken place. So it's trying to articulate, although we've collected all of that money and the pot might be that, so we have already committed a certain proportion of that to certain projects through previous rounds, which then means there is a residual amount, which when we open up bidding, and the report talks about when we will do that again this time, that's the amount that we'll be able to make available for that round of bidding.
I'm grateful to Councillor Farrell for understanding where I'm coming from on this, because, you know, given that money is allocated, how then does that sit with this comment in the further appendix 2.21, which refers specifically to transport? You know, an allocation doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be committed. And that's where I get nervous. If it was sort of transparent, right, we're going to give all of this money to Fazeley, and you know, some more money to Fazeley, and a bit more money to Fazeley, you know, we could all see that was happening and have a go at the local members, for example. But we can't actually see that. It isn't as transparent and as tight as I would want to see, really.
So I think they're two slightly different things then. So paragraph 2.21 in the appendices is referring to the infrastructure list that is being proposed in terms of the money we have available to allocate. So that doesn't include the money that we've already allocated through previous rounds. The reason it is worded as it is and say it doesn't signify a commitment is so that there is still a bidding process for any infrastructure project that falls within the categories on that list at 2.8. There isn't enough money in the SIL pot to fund everything. So that bidding process needs to make sure that decisions on the limited pot, if you will, that probably won't meet bids that come in. There's a process to be gone through. So that's why it's saying it's not if something's on that list, it doesn't necessarily mean when we open the bidding and bids come in that bid will automatically be successful, because there won't be enough money to give to every single bid that comes in. So there does have to be that flexibility to enable the bidding process to go, well, all of the bids have come in and they total £2 million. Well, we've only got £500,000 to give out. So well, where does that money go? So that's why that flexibility is there, I think.
Really agree with my flexibility thing. Maybe they need you need sort of phrase in there or a sentence in there, something about these are our priorities, but and depends on something. So that's helps people. I think that's what you're trying to say, that this is what we want, but it may not work out that way because of the bids and so on. There's probably a sentence somewhere that Colin got that sentence.
Well, I don't know if this is going to be helpful or not, but we'll see. Thank you, Chair. I mean, we did discuss this at length at a previous overview committee. We agreed with the framework that you set before us, and I wondered, but this is, if you like, our community's money. It's money that's coming for developers to help our communities. We will have outcomes that we want to see from the use of that money, and perhaps it might be better to state more clearly what the outcomes that we want, so that then we know that we're getting what we want back from the money we're spending. And that might help also in deciding priorities and where we focus our spend. Because there'll be some of these projects that these folk come up with that are not part of what we desperately need, but other things are. So I just wonder whether somewhere, because I did try and find what the projected outcomes were of all this spend. I couldn't find it anywhere. Maybe it's in there somewhere, and I apologise if I've not looked closely enough. But I think something around those lines might be helpful to everybody.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Maybe even in the form of a mission statement or something. Strict. It's a good point.
Yeah, they said where the direction of travel we want. Yeah, but is that helpful there?
Yeah, very helpful.
Members for Jamie, please, yes.
I must admit, I was probably a bit fatigued by the time I reached 6:33 or whatever it was I was on. So perhaps you can help me with clarity. Am I right in thinking, so the four main areas you're looking for SIL expenditures: healthcare, transport, biodiversity, low carbon, and that's what the bid should come in. My question around that is, in relation to healthcare, I know there's a shortage of healthcare, and I understand that. Is that not an area that's looked after by the NHS or the care boards? Transport infrastructure, is that not a county matter? And I'm just wondering why those are two priorities for district council money to be spent when there are sufficient district council priorities to spend money on. So when there's a shortfall and people are moaning we haven't got this, this and this, those two areas will be supported by our money and therefore not receive the level of criticism when the money's come in for this specific infrastructure that we have responsibility for. Just how does that sit, please? I don't fully understand it. Sorry.
I think them's the rules, but
yeah, basically, I mean, it's a fair point. When you talk about infrastructure, largely a lot of our infrastructure is controlled by the county. That's the way it is, unfortunately. I think when I look at healthcare, I think of things like GP surgeries and increasing capacity and that kind of stuff. But I think Pat probably has a more technical reason as to why it's in there. But yeah, it's a fair point. But I think that these are priorities for our residents as well. We need to, highlight them. And I think these are important priorities to focus on our projects. But in terms of the crossover of councils, how do we navigate that?
So SIL monies have to be for the provision of, it sounds silly saying it because the I in SIL is infrastructure, but for infrastructure. Now, obviously we're in a two-tier authority system. The county don't collect SIL, they can't charge or collect SIL, so we do that. So, you know, from that perspective, those key elements of infrastructure, which I think a lot of people would say are sort of the key elements of infrastructure, which are schools, roads, healthcare, although they're not immediate, we're not responsible for them. They are the key sort of strategic pieces of infrastructure that people need, that development has an impact upon as well. So I don't think we could.
But just kind of help. I mean, they're the rules. That's what you have to do. You're explaining why the rules are there, but you don't have to do that, do you? I mean, that's what we have to do. I think for obvious reasons myself. But can I just bring Stu in and bring Jamie back?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that by serendipity we've hit on a good example of where too often planning gain money is seen as a pot to bail out other areas of the council. And certainly the last round, there was a proposal for improving access to GP surgeries in Lichfield, I believe. And that was all transferred then to leisure services and climbing walls and things like that. Now I can see the connection between leisure services and health, but that would have been a direct benefit if it had been allocated to GP surgeries, a direct benefit for people in our area who can't get GP appointments as quickly as they might. You know, so that's just a good example and a fairly recent example of where the planning gain money has sort of almost been raided to fill in for another priority where the budget isn't there. And I think it's important. I think Colin made the point that this is our community's money, and it should relate to their priorities rather than some of the council's wish list.
Jamie, sorry, I was bring you back. Yes, sorry.
I do get it. It's just that I'm concerned that perhaps a slight interest here in the chair of Lichfield Sports Club, which has been, this fund has always been something that the development of sport has sort of relied on through the different years. I don't see any aspect there that's going to support any sort of development towards actually health and well-being for our local communities under those categories.
I think there is an argument to say that we could help those facilities under these categories. Yeah, I think that there's enough there to allow for that.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify another thing. So at the moment, there's 816,000, 817,000 remains unspent. So that's what's in the pot at the moment. Is that correct? The other thing that I picked up is 1.4 million allocated from SIL for leisure at the moment. Is that from this year? Because there was nothing allocated last year. I got from the report. Said it's about 5 times.
Yeah, not within. So there were no allocations made within the financial year, which the IFS refers to. The allocations were made in the previous year. That includes the 1.4 million you're talking about.
Allocation made from the years previously, but not from the money.
Yes, so the previous rounds of bidding that were undertaken. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that one then. Thank you. Thank you all for that then.
Thank you.
Next item is the LWMTS annual report, and I presume you've all read your emails, your recent emails. Have you? How recent?
I don't know which one sent it.
I wanted to see if they knew, but yes, we'll explain.
So the LWM annual report that is referred to within this item that went to September cabinet, it's been highlighted to me during this meeting, in fact, that it's not actually been included within the agenda pack. It has been available to the public and to members since the 2nd of September when it initially went to cabinet. But yeah, ideally it should have also been within this agenda pack to refer to. So if you check your emails, as the chair was referring to, I have emailed you all a copy of that for reference, so you can refer to it quickly if you are happy to proceed given those facts.
I'll just say I hadn't noticed that. I mean, to be fair, I was a bit all round by the time we got to the end here.
We all were.
So,
Yes, that's my mistake, so my apologies on that.
Chief Executive, are you Andy? Are you cabinet member?
Apparently it's got my name on the top of the report. So officially it's me, I think, to do that. Yeah, and I've not noticed it either, Chairman, that the actual report wasn't attached when I read through it earlier. So there we go. Would you like me to say a few words, Chairman, to kick off?
Please, yes, sorry, yes.
I've got Councillor Fran, I've got the Chief Exec with me, who will be much better than me answering questions on this, as they're both on the board of directors of the trading company. But just very quickly from me, this sets out a review of the. You can speed read it now; it's arrived in your inbox. This sets out a review of the of 23 to 24 of what the company's been doing and what the company will be doing in 24-25. If you take a quick look at section 3.3 of the covering report, which you did have in the back, those are services that are currently being provided by the company. And section 3.4 covering report, which was in the back again, shows the services that the company will add to its portfolio in the coming year. I was also going to say that on page 19 of the actual report, you will see a summary of the accounts. But if you dig in your email, you might be able to pick those out. But just generally for me, in summary, the trading company's had a really good second year. I'd like to pass on my congrats to all the team, including these two gents here, but lots of other people, probably more importantly, involved in doing that. Let's remember when the trading company does better financially, so the council does better financially, because it means it can provide more services. And also the council receives dividends back from the trading, where the trading company makes a profit, if you like. Yeah, the council receives dividends back there. We're the sole, we as in LDC, this council, we're the sole shareholder of this company, so we have full control of this trading company. So essentially, when the company does better, the council does, and of course the most important bit, so do our residents. I'll just let the committee answer any questions, and I'm sure Simon or Councillor Farrell want to cover those off.
Councillor Paul Reid wanted to.
Yes, please, yeah, and I've read the report because it was attached to the cabinet papers, wasn't it? So yeah, and it's positive, and I think the points I'm going to raise I've raised before. So two questions, right? We can see what the services that are going to come into the company during the following year. Just interested in understanding what the future direction of travel is, what the directors of the trading company, I suppose, and you, Andy, and Doug, as leaders of the council, see the direction of travel, and also what services that the trading company are going to be looking to sell to other organisations, whether it's other local associations. And my view on that is, I think that's a positive, but there is risk attached to it, because if we gear up to provide planning services for other councils, that means investment in IT systems, investment in people, and we just need to make sure, as I'm sure is happening, that risk is being managed. And that's part of our role on this overview scrutiny, to understand. So they're the two questions: is from a council point of view, what the direction of travel is for further services to go into this, is because obviously we've got the plan for this forthcoming year, and whether there's anything further into the future, and then when it comes to selling services to other bodies, what the strategy there is.
If I could just chip in first on that, Chair, and I think, and I'll let Simon cut in to answer the sort of the future on where we want to go in terms of those services. But just in terms of your point about the trading company basically selling services to other authorities, or even not just other authorities, even other businesses and organisations is a possibility too. The fact we've got that company set up, I think, is a brilliant vehicle to be able to do that. And yeah, it makes more sense to do some things than others, but I think where it's a no-brainer, we can absolutely look at, and I've been saying this for a long time, we can look at how we can use this vehicle to essentially make a load more profit. And as I mentioned in my sort of overview, any of that profit, the dividends, back into our council for our services we can.
And I support that principle, but it's just as an over-inclusive thing, we just need to, and as a board, keep to be objective about that and making sure that the risk that's been taken on board, because there is risk, that is measured and that's controlled and analysed.
Fully agree. Go on,
I'll
sorry,
go
did you?
first, is that okay? Yeah. So two parts to the question, Chair. The first part is what comes next. And I think essentially there are two mechanisms by which we can identify opportunities for the company to get involved. Either the company directors will say to the council, actually, we think as a company, we're in a position to strengthen that service, to trade that service in the future, in which case we would write a proposal which would have to go through cabinet. Or likewise, the council could ask the company to have a look at a council service and say, would you consider taking this on, please? Clearly, if we do that, then the dynamics are very different. The council's perspective is, how can we get a better service out of it by putting it into the company? The company's perspective is, well, we're a commercial organisation. Can we not only provide a better service back to the council, but can we make a commercial opportunity out of it? So in terms of, we've got an away day coming up shortly as well. The focus of the away day this time, from my perspective as MD, and Alex and I have talked about this as directors as well, is twofold. The financial contribution that we are being asked to provide back to the council this year is significant. So to make sure that we're on track to deliver that. We believe at the moment we are. But more importantly, as you've quite rightly said, Councillor Ray, what are we going to do next? The services that we've landed in the company over the last couple of years are performing well in our view, and I hope that comes out in the report. And I'm conscious that not everybody's had a chance to read it. But we put those services in largely because we felt that we could trade them, and that's what, with my director of the company hat on, that was very much the ambition. Yes, as I said earlier, provide a better service back to the council, but actually use that expertise then to trade it. So if I go through them really briefly, if that will be of use to the committee, really briefly.
Yes.
Where we think we are, yeah. So landlord services is something that we think we could trade. We think that we could provide management of assets to other organisations, be they in the public or the private sector. It's not a massive priority for us to extend that at the moment, because frankly, it's small fry compared to some of the other opportunities, and that service is currently very focused on ensuring that our assets are maximised, and we talked about some of that tonight in terms of the UK SPF project management. So that team is, in addition to doing some of the work it's doing on behalf of the council, is looking at supporting Street Aid to build a new community centre, and they can do that. But also that team is directly delivering disabled facilities grants, not only for ourselves, but also on behalf of Bromford. We believe that we can do that for other councils potentially. We've developed a framework through which they can access that service as well. And so we'd like to take that on the road, as it were, and try to trade it. Talent acquisition, at the moment, I think we're currently working with 3 or 4 other local authorities and at least one company in the private sector. This one feels eminently tradable, to be honest. And so that is one of 3 that we would like to focus on going forward into next year. And I'll explain our ambition for that shortly. Communications is struggling as a service, to be honest. I think, I'm sure if you ask the leader of the council, he'll tell you that as well. That needs more work.
I agree.
Yes, yeah. So its focus at the moment is it's very what's right in front of my nose rather than what is the strategic ambition from our comms perspective for the council. So we're bringing that service directly in-house in terms of, to date, it's been managed externally. It's been outsourced as a management function. We've just appointed a comms director who will be joining the company on the 6th of November. And then we will start to talk to that individual about, well, actually, how do we achieve the council's ambition? And then could we longer term trade some of it? Sponsorship and things like that. The recycling campaign is one highlight, I think, that has been developed by the comms function, but we haven't maximised the opportunity of that. Our leisure services are growing, both from a revenue perspective and a membership perspective. We have looked at, are we in a position yet where we might bid for other councils' leisure services and say, actually, we can bring a community model to the way that you provide leisure, which is very different to what the market is offering at the moment, which is very much bottom line commercial. So we're mulling that over. We're not in any hurry to do that, to be honest, but that is definitely in the future of that service. DFGs, I think you've heard a lot about DFGs over the last. We are currently assessing DFGs for Bromford and one other housing association. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but we think there's more that we can do with that.
Good.
Yeah, but also actually a lot of the skill set that we've identified that lends itself really nicely to building services. So it doesn't have to be for disabled adaptations. What about extensions to people's houses and things like that? So we're gently looking at that, but again, it's not a priority for me anyway. HR payroll is something that is currently outsourced for both the company and the council. We're just in the process of buying HR and payroll system that will bring it back into our control. We want to get payroll right for everybody to make sure that we're comfortable with it. But actually in the future, we've already been approached by 2 or 3 councils who said, would you look at our payroll as well? So there's a trading opportunity for that.
I think once we get that right, I think that's a real obvious one to commercial, I think, yeah.
And what, sorry, just 2 more that are the actual focus. What planning consultancy, I absolutely agree with the potential risk of not having enough capacity, but actually I'm a management consultant by trade. The way that we would resource that, I think we'd be very careful. So it would be task and finish pieces of work. So we could bring in additional capacity to provide support to other organisations. So that's very much something I'd like to talk to the other directors about. And the ecology brokerage. I think that is an enormous opportunity. There are some commercial organisations making a small fortune out of that brokerage service, and actually I'd like to keep that money in the public sector as much as we can and reinvest it in our services. So ecology brokerage, planning consultancy and talent acquisition, I think are the growth areas that we need to focus on. Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, Chair.
I thought that was very good. Thank you. That was excellent.
And I was just going to roll forward a year, the number of people employed by the training company who are delivering, and it's not exact science to the answer, is correct, delivering external services. Do you have a sort of feel of how many additional people the company might have employed to deliver the ecology and the talent acquisition?
Yeah, so talent acquisition, Chair, for you again, talent acquisition, I think we're in a position to add a new member of staff, and that, so we've got 1 member of staff full-time who's doing it currently, and that they're selling services externally as well as providing talent acquisition back to the council. I think next year we will slowly edge up that resource to a second full-time employee, so that the manager can essentially look at actually can further grow that service while the employee is continuing to provide it. So we're not going to do it in a hurry, I think is the answer. Although I do think that one's a rapid growth opportunity. And it'll be similar with brokerage. It will grow slowly, but actually it doesn't need many more people in order to generate significantly larger revenues. We're charging at the moment a percentage essentially for being the broker between a housing developer and a landowner. It doesn't take many more people to do that, because there aren't hundreds of jobs coming over the table, but actually a small number of jobs will generate a very decent return. Planning consultancies, that's the one I think we will flex up and flex down depending on what the demand looks like. And again, there's a ready-made market for interims and or agency type staff that we can use for that, and that protects the company from having an ongoing overhead that we can't guarantee a revenue stream to.
And just so
just
what under the PECL rules,
Yes.
Is there a cap on how much income you can generate not for delivering services to council?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so 80% of our income has got to come from the public sector.
From the public sector.
Yeah, so we're getting some legal advice at the moment, because actually, when I was a management consultant, public sector is a broad term. It's not the individual council that you're talking about. So we're going to check that. At the moment this year, our non-public sector, our non-TECL income is 14%. The cap is 20. If it goes beyond 20%, we will need to look at a group structure for the company. I mean, that from my perspective is a happy position to be in, but we would potentially need to spin off an activity that is generating more than 20% of income from the public sector. But that's only to make sure that we're procuring things appropriately, or that our services are being procured. So we keep an eagle eye on that, and our new finance director has got that as one of her PIs.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. And I suppose that's just what's behind my thinking. Our role as a review scrutiny is that doesn't run away with itself, and you end up with a whole group of companies, and they end up with
Just ask a couple of questions. One is about conflicts of interest. Is there dangers of conflicts of interest sometimes on planning advice and all the rest of it? You know, there's other councils, or you know, we're helping them with that particular issue, or we might be objecting as a planning committee on neighbouring. Just an example. I just wonder if that was something that you flag up and then make sure you avoid, etc.
Yeah, we would definitely seek to avoid it, particularly if it's a neighbouring authority. At the moment, the consultancy element we're looking at is actually more like peer review. So we have a very good, very well established planning director who's well known nationally. So she has the ability to go out and say, actually, rather than using the LGA, for example, we could give you a different type of peer review, peer assessment. So that would be well outside of our region, to be honest, Chair. So I'm less worried about that. But if it gets to the point where we're selling capacity to manage planning applications through the process, that we'd have to be careful about any potential.
A good salesperson doesn't actually slag off the competition, so I presume we don't do that. We just say we are better. They're good, but we are better.
Very much so. And actually, what we're proposing is a far more in-depth planning, peer assessment, and peer review, which is not currently offered.
No,
So
it's not.
it's add value.
Another thing about the talent acquisition, is there a phrase that you use internally that doesn't say talent? If you know what I mean, I can just see, oh, this is the talent guy or whatever, and you know, prove it. I mean, I just wonder if that was
So
psychologically how you went around that. That's all.
I personally, I like it, talent acquisition, because actually that's what we're talking about, attracting talent to our organisation, and we only want the best. We talk about recruitment as well, and it's interchangeable depending on who.
Recruitment's the old school term, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sue and then Colin, please.
Yeah, just to say, I feel as though I've seen the report several times before, and I can only think that I've seen it at the cabinet meeting and perhaps then, but it does feel as though I've seen it several times before, so I'm not too worried about not having had the document attached to on mod.gov. I just wonder whether this is an opportunity to revisit an argument which I've lost in the past, but I think might get some more favour in the future. I'd suggested that as well as a Conservative administration-led representative on the board, it would be helpful in view of the current makeup of the council to have someone from one of the opposition groups. As I say, I lost that argument, or it was sort of sidelined, but you know, I do think it would be helpful, not least in terms of that sort of robust scrutiny and the critical friend idea. You know, I mean, alternatively, we can blame everything that goes wrong ever on the Conservative group, but I just think in terms of collegiate working and working together for the best interests of the residents that we represent, that might be something that your away day could talk about and consider.
I should point out that the chief executive just been talking about getting talent, so I don't.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You might respond.
not on talent. No. Just very briefly, we had an internal audit of the company less than 6 months ago. I think 2 key recommendations they've asked us to consider, and I think it's pertinent that the company will consider it, because we've got to have the company's best interests at heart. But equally, the council should consider the outcome of these scrutiny, the audit reports, internal audit reports. One was that we should consider bringing some more talent onto the board of directors. They proposed non-exec directors and going out to the market and looking for people who could add value to the company and the commercial elements of it. And the second was to have a look at the shareholder representative and whether or not that should broaden out to a larger group. So from a company perspective, we are looking at that at the away day, but actually, you know, we may not agree with the council, but actually the council owns the company, and so there's a role there for the council to express its views as well, I would say.
Okay, well, if I could, Alex,
Sorry, no, go on, mate, you go first.
No, I was just going to add that Simon, Kerry and I met, was it last week, to discuss the internal audit report. So we came up with a variety of options. The chief exec has talked eloquently about them. So we are going to take that to the away day. We're not just giving you platitudes. That is actually something we're going to do, and we'll come up with possibly a range of options for the councils to consider.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Chair, as the current sole shareholder representative for the council, I'm quite open to what Sue's suggesting, to look at a different way we could structure that, either as more shareholder representatives or even on the board of directors of the company, of course. But yeah, we'll
we'll take that away.
Thanks for that. And it would address Paul's concerns about scrutiny and so on.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Colin.
Yeah, Chairman, my point was pretty much the same as the one that Councillor Woodward just made. Because I'd also read the report, and I think I've seen this audit report, or seen reference to this audit report somewhere as well, and noticed those recommendations, and I would strongly recommend that you have another shareholder and perhaps another director as well as a councillor, because when this company was set up as a local housing company about 7 years ago now or something, 7 years ago, the main purpose was to provide housing for sale, which I've never agreed with, as many know. So I got a bit boring on it, I think. And Simon's mentioned lots of things tonight. He didn't mention housing.
Can I give a brief on that then? A brief update?
Yeah, because I just commend what you've done already on housing and hope there'll be more done because there's desperately a need for it. And I think changing to providing rented housing makes much more sense than ever it did to provide housing for sale.
Yeah, would you like me to update briefly?
Yes, if that's okay.
So full council approved a recommendation that just over £2 million was put aside to develop social housing, temporary accommodation. That money came from Section 106, which I know we talked about a little bit earlier this evening, and from commuted sums from developers who were unable to provide it. We are about ready to ask the lead member, who's got delegated authority, to approve the options appraisal piece of work, and that was needed alongside the Section 151 and somebody else, and I can't remember. It may well have been me on the delegations. I'm sorry. But whilst doing that, and this is, I think, one of the beauties as a company, we've been shopping for houses for the last couple of weeks or so. We've identified, I think, 8 properties that we would like to purchase during the course of this year, and they are a range of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom properties as well, which meets some of the needs from temporary accommodation. Earlier tonight, Anthony and the leader were talking about the pressure on that budget, that revenue budget for temporary accommodation. Well, that is in part because we're paying bed and breakfast and hotels commercial rates to provide accommodation for our residents. We won't need to do that if we can bring these houses on stream very quickly. I'd like to see 10 or 11 properties brought on stream before the end of this financial year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, thanks so much indeed. Yeah, I think that's it for that item. I appreciate that.
Sorry, in the pre-meeting, Councillor Ray suggested that this should become something that happens every 6 months.
Yeah, I was going to suggest it leads on to the next item with the, we've got it in the work programme now
True, yeah.
on a 6 monthly cycle to have an update.
Yeah. Can I just say, as part of the discussions we had about the audit reports, we agreed that scrutiny should probably play a bigger role in the company, and regardless of how the structure looks in a year or two's time, we were keen, weren't we, to come regularly to scrutiny, because I think that's really important as the company grows. So yeah, we all in favour of that. Yeah.
Is there because I'm just thinking, Chair, when ONS meets, is there a natural yearly date
So next week at the board, we will look at the half-year position. So that would feel like a really good, from a financial perspective, feel like a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
Time.
So yes, so to come back to ONS would be, so that's the half year now, is it? And then so there's one in April, 2nd of April, I guess that would be, would that?
Might be a little bit tight in terms of the accounts and things, but we should know more or less where we are. Yeah.
Yeah, 20th of May is the one after that. So
that one I would feel much more comfortable in terms of being able to share financial outcome.
Okay. Yeah. Dave, thanks. That's it. I'll go on to the only to draw attention to agenda item 11, which is really just to publicise. I'll say it's my fault it's not worded in a way that might make sense, but it was. I just asked for it to be on the agenda because these were the issues that Councillor Richard Cox shared with us, and I just wanted to draw members' attention to that. It's up to members to actually get back, but there might be an opportunity in the future to involve the inspector to come to this committee if we thought that was useful. So it was just drawing attention to that for members. And the last item really is the work programme, and
can I just comment on that particular item?
Briefly.
Because, we've been told during the past week or so that the current Chief Inspector, Inspector Karen Green, is elsewhere, and you people have been appointed to this role. Can I just, off the committee, perhaps I'll just move a vote of thanks to Inspector Ian for the work that she's done with the Community Safety Partnership and with individual members during her tenure, which has been greatly appreciated.
And could I add an amendment to that? Regret that she has to move on for reasons that are unclear to anyone. Certainly to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you.
But yeah, she has been a really good officer, and she's kept us informed really well, and it's just so disappointing to see that they come and they go so rapidly,
Yes,
because
yeah.
consistency is so important.
I'll pass that on. I'll work with Will on that one, passing those comments on to her then, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I suppose just to reiterate what Di said, I've had a situation recently, which you know a bit about, and regular feedback, which is, as a council, that's what you want when you're trying to liaise with residents, and just have, whatever authority it is, just to have that communication. So reiterate, that's a good point.
I remember getting these points to Constable Giffard many years ago, and the understanding that it's that feedback that's essential, I think. You know, you've actually made some. You've been listened to. All your the residents on whom you're complaining is listened to. I think Richard did you want to say something further about that?
I just wanted to say, obviously, you've expressed about Karen is absolutely. I think we're all upset about it in many ways. But I can tell you the biggest person that's upset about it is Karen. She rang me up prior to the announcement out of courtesy, and you could tell she was upset. It is a move that's obviously come across. It's not her move, but it's a move that's being made. It was made clear that Chief Inspector Matt Morgan's post was still open. She was temporarily filling it, and what she was then given the permanent temporary filling. So we weren't going to get somebody else. So it was the permanent temporary. And unfortunately, it has to do something else. It's not. She loves Lichfield. We do have Paul Finlay, so we'll step up to Chief Inspector, and we will get I can't remember her name now, but Inspector Darby, a lady. And as soon as there's an opportunity, obviously I will meet them. We will continue to have those two briefing sessions in the year. In itself I felt members appreciated that as well. So, but happy that if anything that, the Scrutiny Committee wants us to enact on, I'm quite happy to, look at ways of improving things for the council.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Keeping on the work programme. Thank you. So, well, do you want to say that? We've got the work programme in front of you for the next meeting. Is actually on the 2nd of December. Health matters, of course, as always. Task groups. To the right corner as it goes wrong. And the financial planning. This is the services. The service and financial planning proposals. That's the next meeting. And the homelessness and rough sleeper strategy. That's on that as well. And
Chair, before we move
you want to go on to that one now? Yes, I was going to bring you in.
The next page, the empty home strategy. We looked at this initially in January, and we were told that we brought back to an ONS committee before going to cabinet. It doesn't appear as a tick in any of those boxes. I just wonder when it will be back, please.
The homeless and rough.
No, the empty homes policy.
Empty home.
Empty home. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. I'm going to. Anybody know? Anybody? We can find out. Seems to know, so we'll find out.
I mean,
Where is it here?
It will soon be. I mean,
you have a clue.
It's only 2 months 2 or 3 months till it's January again. And empty homes, we had a quite intensive session, a helpful session. We had some positive ideas coming from the cabinet member and the staff member, positive suggestions from us. And, you know, there are lots of empty properties around the area. Maybe some of these are the ones that Simon's going to buy. And we did talk about compulsory purchase and ways, and I know of a few empty properties that residents are very upset about. Nothing seems to be happening with them. So I think it's important that we actually do get that back as a cabinet decision, but we review it before it goes to cabinet. So just would like to know when it's coming to us.
And whether you can help.
Thank you. Thanks, Lizzie. Thank you.
Just to also, Chair, after this agenda went out with this work programme, I then received a subsequent request. The homelessness and rough sleep strategy comes to the January meeting rather than the next one in December. Just so members aware.
Thank you. Over the page, the Lichfield District 2050 strategy. Got local plan issues and there's consultation there, which maybe they're appearing at a later stage. And then highlighted the funding statement and the, sorry, keep going to the wrong column here. Forget all that. Medium-term financial strategy, as always. And then I didn't quite understand the last bit there with the last column.
Briefing papers. That
Just all the briefing papers.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're briefing paper. Oh yeah, sorry, on the page beforehand. Okay, Susan Woodward.
Can I make a couple of suggestions? A delegated decision is going through the process at the moment on demand transport, and I've made a comment previously about community transport or whatever. It's not my intention to call the decision in, but it's really thin on detail, and it would be really helpful to know a bit more about this because it is a priority area for the people represented. It's been made earlier on by Paul or Miles, I can't remember which, but you know, community transport, on demand transport is really important. Would it be possible, I know it's perhaps relatively short notice, to get that onto the agenda, you know, so that we can just get more detail about that. The other suggestion as well is they're right at the bottom of the report is community safety partnership, and I've had numerous discussions with Councillor Cox about this over the last 9-10 months, because he did say he made a commitment at the December full council meeting that, you know, things were going to get much better, and it would be and I know things have been going on in the background to make sure that it is a more robust set up and, you know, true partnership working. So would that be possible for the next meeting, which is a relatively light agenda? Hopefully it can be.
Yeah, we can try it. We'll ask for that and then see if we get members on that. Yeah. Hey. Oh, Scott, we do it now.
Just to let you know, saying Lizzie, we're very happy for that.
We must have missed something then.
Community.
We have it next week. Right, thank you. That is the end of the agenda. I appreciate everybody my advice regarding the local plan, not to everything and thank everybody for the